Chapter 1151. Knock, knock. Upon hearing two dull thuds at the door, Gu Junqing and Lin Xue immediately fell silent, their expressions turning somber. Lin Xue, in particular, was on edge. Having been constantly hunted throughout the journey, she was like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bowstring. She felt a surge of anxiety, wondering if Gu Junqing could truly protect her. After all, Gu Junqing was incredibly beautiful, and beauty didn't necessarily equate to high combat prowess. Still, she had no choice but to place her trust in her. "Don't worry, it might just be our people," Gu Junqing whispered comfortingly. Despite her words, her heart sank and she grew increasingly vigilant. The person at the door had not used the secret code. If it were their own people, such a mistake would never happen. "Understood," Lin Xue murmured in response. "Who is it?" Gu Junqing asked, walking slowly toward the door. "Room service, I have your meal." A muffled voice came from the other side. Gu Junqing felt a brief moment of relief, but when she turned to look at Lin Xue, she saw pure terror on the girl's face. Lin Xue's mouth moved slightly, signaling that she hadn't ordered any room service. Gu Junqing's eyes widened, her expression hardening, and as she sensed movement outside, she lunged toward Lin Xue, pulling her down as they rolled to the side. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Several bullets from a silenced pistol tore through the door. Because the cruise ship door was made of solid wood rather than steel, the bullets pierced straight through toward where Lin Xue had been standing. Fortunately, Gu Junqing had pulled her out of the way in time, or Lin Xue would surely have been hit. The assassin outside stared with cold, merciless eyes, having used the sound to pinpoint their location and fire directly at where they had been whispering. He wasn't sure if he had killed his targets, and in his line of work, confirming the kill was essential. He reached out with his pistol to grasp the doorknob and force the door open. At that exact moment, a silver spike about 8 or 9 centimeters long ripped through the wooden door. The assassin's pupils widened, and he desperately tried to dodge, but his body felt sluggish, unable to match the speed of the silver needle. The last image in his mind was the flash of a needle flying toward his brain. Clang! With a heavy thud against the wall, the assassin's head was pinned directly to the corridor wall by the silver spike. His body hung suspended in midair, still twitching slightly. Gu Junqing's gaze remained icy as she stood up from her throwing stance. Lin Xue glanced at the massive hole the needle had punched through the door and the assassin clearly pinned to the wall. She couldn't bring herself to look a second time at such a gruesome scene, turning instead to the beautiful woman beside her with a look of stunned disbelief. She couldn't fathom how such a breathtakingly beautiful woman could strike with such swift, lethal precision. She stood there, mouth agape, unable to utter a word. "Are you okay?" Gu Junqing asked, quickly turning to look at Lin Xue. "I'm fine," Lin Xue replied, nodding obediently, appearing as docile as possible. Previously, she had thought of Gu Junqing as just someone to confide in, even hoping to become friends once they safely reached the capital. Now, she wasn't sure how she was supposed to act around her. "I'm glad. It was my carelessness this time. It seems I've been away from missions for too long, letting someone get the drop on us first," Gu Junqing sighed. She hadn't gone on any missions since returning to the capital, and being thrust into one now, she felt a bit rusty. Chapter 1152. Lin Xue didn't know what to say in response to Gu Junqing's frustration, as they had only just met. However, the method Gu Junqing had used sent a chill down her spine. Thinking of the assassin whose head had been pierced by a steel spike and pinned to the wall, his feet not even touching the floor, Lin Xue couldn't help but gulp. She had just been thinking of Gu Junqing as a potential best friend. If they were to argue as friends later, would she end up like that? Lin Xue silently dismissed the thought. People outside soon noticed the commotion. After all, the area was under surveillance by those protecting Lin Xue, which was the very reason for Gu Junqing's momentary lapse in caution. She had assumed the person really was there to deliver a meal. "Are you two okay?" The middle-aged woman and several others charged with protecting Lin Xue rushed out. After ordering others to clean up the corpse, and the blood splattered about, the woman entered to inquire. "We're fine," Gu Junqing replied, shaking her head. "I didn't expect the enemy to actually locate you, so I went to scout other cabins." It was in that moment of absence that this person found an opening. The middle-aged woman gave a bitter smile. "I'm glad you're both safe. It's all right. This trouble was brought on by me, and your people have suffered many casualties, so I'm truly sorry," Lin Xue said with a heavy heart. She had seen this middle-aged woman before, as it was she who had sent the protection detail along the way. Many of their department's staff had been wounded or killed during the journey. Lin Xue felt deep guilt. She didn't even know why she had attracted such trouble. Seeing this, Gu Junqing smiled faintly. "This is our mission, so you don't need to feel so guilty. Just follow our arrangements and keep yourself safe." Their department was a clandestine branch of the state, handling assassinations, bounties, and the protection of VIPs. They were involved in the security of key scientific, political, commercial, and military personnel. The assassinations they encountered were common occurrences. As long as the mission was accomplished, they didn't care much about casualties. "It seems these people have gathered a lot of intelligence on us, even calculating our shift change and inspection times," Gu Junqing said, turning to the middle-aged woman with a serious expression. "I noticed earlier that the surrounding cabins are riddled with listening devices. We've likely been exposed." "It seems that way, but there's nothing else we can do. We are short-handed," the middle-aged woman said helplessly. "We are still some distance from the capital. If we just hunker down like this, the enemy's probing will become increasingly frequent." Gu Junqing continued, We don't know how many of them there are, what weapons they have, or even who they are. Or I would have gone out and wiped them all out myself. She sighed inwardly, frustrated by their lack of intelligence. If she knew who the assassins were, their numbers, and their locations, she could simply finish them all off once and for all. Lin Xue stood to the side, glanced at Gu Junqing, and then silently lowered her head, remaining mute. For someone who looked so gentle, she possessed a chilling intent to kill that made Lin Xue afraid to say anything more. This mission was rushed, and the intelligence department hasn't finished vetting them, so there aren't many good options right now, the middle-aged woman explained. Then there is only one option left. Gu Junqing suggested, can we ask if the people in the luxury cabins would be willing to trade spots, or perhaps give up a room for us? Chapter 1153. There is only one solution left. Can we ask the people in the luxury suites if they would be willing to trade spots, or perhaps give us a room? Our current location has been compromised. If we don't move, we will face too many disturbances and probes. Plus, there are quite a few people in the first-class cabins. If we cause a scene that attracts attention, everyone here will be penalized. Gu Junqing suggested, her expression solemn. Although the assassin who had posed as room service had already been tossed into the sea to feed the fish, everyone was well aware that this was merely a probe sent by those assassin organizations. If they didn't relocate immediately, the next step would likely be a full-scale assault. Even Gu Junqing might not be able to protect Lin Xue under those circumstances. While the first-class cabins weren't as crowded as the second or third-class ones, there were still plenty of people around. They generally preferred not to engage in a major battle in front of ordinary people. In the Xia country, ordinary people rarely even saw fistfights in their daily lives. A simple brawl could cause a nationwide uproar. If they suddenly witnessed a real battle, it would be fine if they ran to safety. But if they mistook it for a show or a movie shoot and came over to watch, leading to casualties, everyone involved would be punished. Therefore, the best option was to move to the luxury top-deck cabins, where access was strictly controlled and the environment was different from the standard cabins. I understand that, but I don't know if young Master Gu would be willing. Besides, even in the luxury cabins, those assassins might still find us. The middle-aged woman gave a bitter smile. But it would be easier to defend. At the very least, it wouldn't be as crowded and chaotic as it is here, making it impossible to tell who is an assassin. We can't just stay in this room for the entire journey. Wait. Gu Junqing felt somewhat helpless given the situation, but after speaking, she suddenly froze. You said young Master Gu? Which young Master Gu? Gu Junqing, the young master of the Gu family. According to our intelligence, he is the current power behind the Gu group. He is also the grandson of the Xia family in the capital. The middle-aged woman hadn't wanted to say anything, but seeing Gu Junqing's determined expression, she could only provide a full explanation. The influence wielded by that young master of the Gu family was immense. Even with the resources of their intelligence department, what they had uncovered was likely just the tip of the iceberg. Unless it was an absolute necessity, she had no desire to provoke him. He's here too? That's wonderful. Gu Junqing was surprised, yet also pleased. You know him? The middle-aged woman was slightly stunned. Yes, I doubt he'll have any issues giving up a room for us. Gu Junqing nodded slightly. Since beginning this mission, she hadn't contacted Gu Junqing or the others, and she had only just learned he was on this cruise ship. If things followed the instructions she received when embarking on the mission, her third sister might also be on this ship. At the thought of seeing her sister, whom she hadn't seen for several days, even someone as disciplined as Gu Junqing felt a surge of happiness. That's fantastic. Let's go now. The middle-aged woman was overjoyed to hear this. She immediately ordered her subordinates to pack up and scout the path, ensuring at the very least that the route to the luxury cabins was secure. Lin Xue stood to the side, looking slightly dazed. She couldn't help but feel a surge of curiosity about this Gu Junqing that Gu Junqing and the others were talking about. Although she was an heir to her family's business, her actual status wasn't particularly high. At best, she was considered middle-class in status. Therefore, she was quite curious about the legendary young master of the Gu family. Chapter 1154. The distance between first class and the luxury cabins was not short. They would need to pass through several restaurants and dance halls, so Gu Junqing and the others needed to be fully prepared. She had a premonition that the journey to escort Lin Xue to the luxury cabins would not be peaceful. After some discussion, they decided that Gu Junqing would protect Lin Xue closely while the others checked the surrounding environment. Once the plan was set, they moved out immediately. Lin Xue followed closely at Gu Junqing's side. She didn't know martial arts and was no different from an ordinary person, so she had to rely entirely on Gu Junqing in this situation. Sister Ji, don't you feel like this line of work is dangerous? Lin Xue asked in a low voice as they walked. Although the constant pursuit along the way had been dangerous and had nearly cost her life several times, the thrill of walking on the edge of a blade made Lin Xue feel strangely excited and curious. Her entire life had been lived under her family's arrangements, stagnant and uneventful like a pool of dead water. She used to think of herself as the darling of heaven, with a good family background and beauty that had been praised by countless people since childhood. She had received countless love letters since elementary school, but this experience had shattered all of her pride. Even though those things had given her a strong sense of security and self-satisfaction before today, when she couldn't even guarantee her own survival, she realized they were all useless. That was why everything about the industry Ji Hanyan worked in made her feel curious and longing. She didn't dare to ask anyone else, such as the middle-aged woman, who seemed to be their boss. But Ji Hanyan was close to her in age, and her appearance gave her a sense of familiarity. Even the swift and decisive kill earlier had only stirred up a momentary fear in her. Of course it's dangerous. Even though Ji Hanyan was monitoring the surroundings, she smiled as she heard Lin Xue's question. The way Lin Xue looked at her, almost like an older sister, gave Ji Hanyan the feeling of facing her own younger sister. Then why do you still do it? Do your family members agree with it? Even though she felt her question was a bit intrusive, Lin Xue asked in a low voice. My family, they are naturally worried. Thinking of her younger sisters, Ji Hanyan's eyes softened, though she continued. As for why I chose this line of work, perhaps it's just that my abilities happen to be suited for it. After saying this, Ji Hanyan sighed inwardly. Her strength was enough to serve the country by completing missions like assassinating political figures, protection details, or bounties. But she couldn't do things like her fourth sister, who fought in war zones, or her eldest sister, who wandered the ancient martial arts world challenging experts everywhere. What did she mean by her abilities being suited for this? Lin Xue was confused, but she didn't feel it was appropriate to keep asking, so she just nodded. Their conversation didn't last long, because they were about to pass through the most dangerous area, a massive dance hall. It was roughly the time after dinner when people were digesting their food, so there were many people dancing and drinking here. Tables and chairs were set up all around, and many people were sitting there, drinking and enjoying the dancers on stage. There were also many people walking back and forth, creating a chaotic and complex scene. In this environment, it was hard to judge who was a killer and who wasn't. It was difficult to decide whether to intervene if someone approached, and starting a fight here would surely cause quite a commotion. Chapter 1155. Just as Ji Hanyan was deliberating how to navigate the dance hall safely, she failed to notice a man sitting on a nearby sofa watching them obscurely through a reflection. His name was Richard Riva, ranked 78th on the world's top 100 assassin list, and known globally for his superb fighting and shooting skills. He was adept at planning and executing various assassination missions, achieving one-shot kills in almost any situation. As the CEO of the largest smuggling syndicate, he was notorious, and no one wanted to provoke him, because the consequences were far worse than death. He had once served an ancient military noble family, and rarely stepped into the assassin circles in Xia country, with very few people capable of compelling him to take action. He had long grown tired of the assassin's life and planned to focus on running his smuggling company. However, the employer's offer this time was too astonishing, and the target was just an ordinary woman, so he readily accepted. Damn diva, he muttered internally. He said he found the target but didn't tell us, wanting to pocket the commission alone. Now that the target has reappeared, he has gone quiet. He likely met his maker. How laughable. Richard Riva squinted as he watched the two figures in the reflection, inwardly mocking the assassin, who had been so confident. Just then, Ji Hanyan suddenly felt something was amiss, and narrowed her eyes, focusing on the surroundings. Has she noticed me? No, she doesn't know where I am yet. It seems she is a master. Richard Riva had assumed the commission was as good as his, as the chaotic, dim, and noisy environment made for an incredibly easy assassination. If he couldn't pull off a hit in this setting, he would have no business being on the world's top 100 assassin list. Yet, he was secretly startled that his gaze had only wandered for a moment, before the woman with such oriental charm had detected him. If someone could just sense being looked at, that might be considered an average expert. But the fact that she could detect his line of sight through multiple mirror reflections required real, substantial skill. He didn't care, however, as he possessed the same ability. Every assassin in the top 100 was extremely sensitive to being watched, whether it was direct or through mirror reflections. Richard Riva raised his red wine glass and finished it in one gulp. His other hand reached into his suit jacket, gripping a mini pistol fitted with a silencer. In such a noisy environment, who would notice the sound of a silenced pistol? He only needed to get slightly closer and find an angle where no one was blocking him. He could kill the target through his clothes before making a swift getaway. Even that expert might not be able to find him. Richard Riva allowed a smirk to curl his lips. 5 billion, it would soon be his. Richard Riva stood up with extreme gentlemanly grace, appearing entirely inconspicuous in the noisy dance hall. Logically, no one would have noticed his existence. But the moment he stood up and looked toward Ji Hanyan, he discovered that the talented woman had immediately turned to stare in his direction. Did she find me this fast? Wait, what is? Richard Riva felt something flash toward him with the speed of lightning. His brain didn't even have time to react before his consciousness vanished. To onlookers, it just looked as though he had swayed like a drunkard and sat back down in his original seat. The surrounding crowd didn't think anything of it, continuing to drink and make noise. After all, there were plenty of people getting drunk here. Chapter 1156. Ji Hanyan's sudden turn startled Lin Xue, who quickly asked what had happened. It's nothing, it's been taken care of. Ji Hanyan exhaled a sigh of relief, speaking in a calm tone. She could sense the difference in the opponent's aura and presence. He was clearly a long-renowned assassin. He had simply underestimated her. He thought he could easily assassinate her and Lin Xue in this environment. Little did he know, she had already noticed his presence, even if she hadn't pinpointed his exact location until then. Even after dealing with that assassin, she could still sense malicious gazes probing them from the surroundings. However, the others left behind didn't give Gu Junqing the same feeling as that foreign assassin. If that foreign assassin hadn't been so careless, taking him out in a direct confrontation wouldn't have been easy. At the very least, it would have definitely drawn the attention of those around them. Silently taking him out was the best option. Gu Junqing breathed a sigh of relief. Oh. Lin Xue didn't know what had just happened and could only nod in bewilderment. Let's go. Leaving the remaining small fry untouched for now, Gu Junqing led Lin Xue across the dance hall toward the luxury cabins. The dim, flickering lights bathed the two stunning women, their beauty seemingly lighting up the entire dance hall. Both their skin was as delicate as white jade. They shone in the darkness like two dazzling stars, radiating a unique brilliance. Gu Junqing's long eyelashes cast soft shadows on her cheeks, giving her a sense of immense tenderness and mystery. Her lips were like rose petals. Against the backdrop of the dim lights, her features appeared even more defined, exquisite like a finely carved work of art. Her beauty was not a superficial flamboyance, but an elegance and temperament that radiated from within. It was an ineffable beauty that could be felt regardless of the lighting. One look was enough to be deeply drawn in, unable to tear their gaze away. Lin Xue was equally beautiful, and what caught one's attention most were her bright eyes, like pools of clear water. They sparkled like two brilliant stars in the shifting light, lively and alluring. Her long eyelashes cast faint shadows on her lids, adding a touch of shyness and charm. Her straight nose bridge gave her face dimension, and her snow-white skin was particularly eye-catching. Their appearance acted as an ignition agent for the atmosphere, like a drop of water falling into a pot of hot oil. Men's eyes followed their figures with greedy gazes, and within moments, several men in suits, looking confident and successful, approached to try their luck and ask them to dance. Both women rejected them all. Under Gu Junqing's cold and intimidating gaze, no one dared to make a fool of themselves, and they hesitated to approach further. Fortunately, the middle-aged woman's subordinates soon appeared, blocking all the unwanted attention for them. During this time, there were still assassins who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to attempt an assassination on Lin Xue. However, seeing that Gu Junqing could still protect Lin Xue perfectly well under such conditions, no one dared to make a move. Richard Riva, the world-famous assassin, had been killed by that terrifying woman right before their eyes, and it had all ended before they could even grasp what happened. Such strength chilled the hearts of those who knew they weren't as good as Richard Riva. With that, no more assassins dared to take action. Gu Junqing and Lin Xue successfully navigated the chaotic dance hall. The rest of the journey went smoothly, and they encountered no other blind assassins. Chapter 1157. Third sister, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Hurry up and open the door. Dao Tianyan pounded on Lu Qingyi's door, his voice filled with frantic urgency. Inside the room, hearing the commotion, Lu Qingyi scrambled off the man she was with, rushing to pull on her clothes. Bathed in the dim light, the man lying on the bed was startlingly handsome, his dark eyes radiating a lazy, untamed charm as he lay shirtless, his skin marked with faint, telltale red splotches. Why are you in such a rush? Gu Junqing wrapped his arms around Lu Qingyi's soft, fair body, and pulled her back onto his chest. Over the last few days at sea, while they hadn't crossed the final line, they had explored just about every other boundary of intimacy. They had reached the point where they knew every inch of each other. Although, technically, Gu Junqing had only used his hand to test the depth of Lu Qingyi. Can't you hear Tianyan calling for me? Lu Qingyi's eyes were still soft and sultry, her cheeks flushed as she spoke with a hint of helplessness. Calling so intimately? I've never heard you call me Junqing like that. Gu Junqing let out a light huff, playing the part of someone deeply wronged. Lu Qingyi no longer felt any resistance toward him, and the faint, lingering hostility she once harbored had completely vanished. Whether Gu Junqing had completely cured her of her androphobia was anyone's guess. Regardless, she had become remarkably obedient and pliable toward him. Perhaps this was the nature of women. As long as a man satisfied them, they could be as tender as water. If a man couldn't satisfy them, he would have to endure the wrath of a lioness. Women are like wolves at 30, tigers at 40, and can absorb the earth at 50. Men, however, are the exact opposite, which explains why women's tempers seem to grow shorter over time. I always call you honey when we're alone. Lu Qingyi looked at Gu Junqing with sultry, intoxicating affection in her eyes. After experiencing that sensation, which felt like ascending to pure bliss, she knew she could never leave him. All right, enough messing around. Haven't we had enough for a while? Not enough. I could mess around with you for a lifetime, for 10,000 years. Gu Junqing's honeyed words flowed effortlessly, a practiced talent that required no thought, pure, instinctive reflex. Enough. Dao Tianyan is clearly looking for me because of something urgent. What if he busts in? Besides, you don't want him to see you here, do you? Lu Qingyi shot him a glare and whispered, why do I get the distinct feeling that I'm the other man, and the husband just showed up at the door? Gu Junqing rubbed his chin and chuckled softly. You. Stop talking. I'm ignoring you. Unable to handle his cheeky demeanor, Lu Qingyi finally couldn't resist pinching him, then quickly straightened her clothes to answer the door. What's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry? Lu Qingyi stepped out, closing the door firmly behind her to block Dao Tianyan's view of the interior, and addressed him with feigned calm. Third sister, what were you doing? Why did it take so long to open the door? Dao Tianyan looked at Lu Qingyi's stunning, beautiful face, and upon seeing a suspicious flush still lingering on her cheeks, he asked with a hint of suspicion. I was just sleeping. I only just woke up. It was hard to tell if Dao Tianyan believed her or not, but he stood there staring, transfixed by her beauty. His heart pounded in his chest. It was the first time he had seen his third sister look so radiant, almost like a captivating siren. Seeing her expression sour, he quickly stammered, I think I saw second sister. It looks like she's bringing people over here, and someone wants to discuss something with us. Dao Tianyan looked uncertain. What? Second sister is on the ship too. Chapter 1158. What? Second sister is on the ship too. Lu Qingyi couldn't believe it, her moist, shiny red lips parting slightly as her face filled with astonishment. Looking at this, Dao Tianyan felt a rush of excitement, his heart feeling as if it were being scratched by a cat. However, he didn't dare to get too close to his third sister, fearing that her androphobia would make her hate him if he got too near. Every time he thought of one of his sisters hating him, Dao Tianyan felt his heart suffocate. He would rather die than have his sisters hate him. Dao Tianyan made a firm decision in his heart. He must cure Lu Qingyi's androphobia. If he did that, maybe Lu Qingyi would grow to like him. Don't space out. Hurry up and tell me where you saw second sister. Lu Qingyi noticed Dao Tianyan staring blankly at her, feeling both displeased and anxious, so she waved a hand in front of him to complain. Dao Tianyan came back to his senses, realizing his third sister was unhappy, so he quickly said, it wasn't me who saw her. One of second sister's subordinates came to report that she would be bringing people to stay with us. They sounded very urgent, as if someone is chasing second sister and her group. Being chased. Lu Qingyi's expression changed. She knew the dangers of her second sister's job, so she didn't dare to be careless, saying anxiously, then let's go quickly to provide backup. She didn't even care about Gu Junqing in the room anymore, rushing with Dao Tianyan toward the elevator connecting the luxury VIP cabins and the first-class cabins. Because the luxury VIP cabins were on the top deck and usually separated from the first-class cabins, the only way to enter was via elevator or by climbing up from the outside. They naturally didn't think Gu Hanyan, who was escorting someone, would climb up from the outside. As the two headed toward the elevator, Gu Junqing pushed open the door and walked out, his eyes showing a touch of surprise. He had naturally heard the conversation between the two at the door clearly, and his lips twitched when he heard Gu Hanyan was also on the ship. Normally, with one heroine and one protagonist present, he would worry about the ship's safety. He was just afraid of another shipwreck. Now, another heroine had arrived, and she clearly brought serious problems with her. Assassinations, missions, all these words made Gu Junqing feel uneasy. The ship really might not survive this. Gu Junqing sighed softly. The only good news now was that they were close to the shore, making rescue nearby, and the weather was good, so they shouldn't end up on a deserted island. Gu Junqing didn't have a better solution for now, so he could only make the best of it. But what Gu Junqing didn't expect was that it wasn't just one heroine arriving now, but two. Soon after, Gu Junqing didn't hesitate and headed toward the elevator as well. He missed Gu Hanyan, and since he had nearly cured Lu Qingyi, he was still waiting for the reward Gu Hanyan had promised him. Meanwhile, with Gu Hanyan, whoosh. Instantly, a faint whistling sound broke the air, and a black shadow shot toward Gu Hanyan's position at high speed. Gu Hanyan's slender hand moved rapidly, and with a silver needle, she instantly knocked down the flying dart aimed at her. At the same time, she didn't dare to be slow, tapping her toes on the ground and shooting out like a ghost, moving faster than the naked eye could track, killing the enemy assassin on the spot in an instant. Lin Xue cowered in the corner, trembling, trying her best not to become a burden to Gu Hanyan. After the two passed through the dance hall, the assassins didn't know why they had appeared so openly, but seeing them head straight for the elevator, the many hesitant assassin organizations immediately understood their intention. They wanted to escape to the luxury VIP cabins. So, they took advantage of the crowd-free moments to attack openly. Ding. Hurry. Hearing the elevator sound, Gu Hanyan, having just finished off another assassin, pulled Lin Xue and dashed into the elevator during the gap. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bullets and hidden weapons flew toward them. Fortunately, the elevator closed just in time, and the weapons and bullets all struck the wall without harming either of them. Whew, we finally escaped. Now it's up to that guy to see if he has a solution. Seeing that Lin Xue was uninjured, Gu Hanyan breathed a sigh of relief. They didn't have enough manpower on the ship to deal with these assassins without causing a scene or harming other passengers. To resolve this, she had no choice but to find Gu Junqing first and see if he had a solution. Chapter 1159. At the elevator entrance, Lu Qingyi and Dao Tianyan waited anxiously for the cabin to arrive. When they heard the sound of the lift ascending, they both let out a sigh of relief. However, they didn't know who was coming up, so Dao Tianyan braced himself for action. If the people stepping out weren't the second sister, he would show those assassins exactly what the Azura King was capable of. What's going on? Why are you both so tense? At that moment, Gu Junqing walked over slowly, his handsome face wearing just the right touch of confusion. He certainly wasn't going to mention that he had overheard the entire situation from inside Lu Qingyi's room. If he said that, Dao Tianyan would definitely try to kill him. Gu Junqing and Lu Qingyi's gazes lingered on each other for a fleeting moment before breaking away, a nuance completely unnoticed by Dao Tianyan. What does this have to do with you? Why do you have to stick your nose into everything? Dao Tianyan said with undisguised hostility and resentment. Trouble had befallen the second sister, and now was the time for him, the world-renowned Azure King, to shine. If he could help her successfully complete this mission, he would surely win her favor. He had no desire for Gu Junqing to interfere in this kind of matter. That's enough. The important thing right now is the second sister's situation. Don't blame me if I lose my temper if you two keep arguing, Lu Qingyi said impatiently. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The relationship between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan gave her an unrelenting headache. They argued whenever they met, and even when apart, they slandered and attacked each other. She suspected they might have been bitter enemies in a past life. She now had absolutely no desire to tell Dao Tianyan about her relationship with Gu Junqing. She finally understood why the other sisters, even after becoming involved with Gu Junqing, were unwilling to go public or even speak much about it. It was simply because they feared Dao Tianyan would fight Gu Junqing to the death. If Dao Tianyan ever found out that his sisters had all been intimate with Gu Junqing, she felt that even if he died, he would be thinking about taking Gu Junqing down with him. Dao Tianyan could only shut his mouth in frustration, shooting a resentful and angry glare at Gu Junqing. It was all because of this bastard that he had been scolded by the third sister. He would make him pay sooner or later. Gu Junqing chuckled softly, but didn't say anything further. The priority now was to get to the bottom of exactly what had happened to the second sister. Without caring whether Gu Junqing had overheard her previous conversation with Dao Tianyan, Lu Qingyi gave him a rundown of the situation again. So that's the situation. The second sister is bringing her mission target here. What do you think we should do? After explaining, Lu Qingyi pulled Gu Junqing aside and asked him in a low voice. Dao Tianyan felt annoyed by the sight, but having just been reprimanded by Lu Qingyi, he didn't dare to act out further. He just snorted and focused his attention back on the elevator. Gu Junqing had booked the entire luxury cabin section to give Lu Qingyi subordinates a vacation. Rooms were already in short supply, with most colleagues sharing 2 or 3 to a room, so freeing up space for the second sister, Gu Hanyan, and her group would clearly not be easy. After all, Gu Hanyan and her mission target clearly needed a room together. Then there were the others from Gu Hanyan's department. The most critical issue was safety. The second sister must have encountered serious trouble, otherwise, with her skills, such a problem would be impossible. Lu Qingyi was conflicted. Firstly, she didn't want to spoil the fun for her employees who had finally managed to get away for a vacation. Secondly, the safety of her employees was also a pressing concern. You're not worried about the second sister's danger? The thing you're actually concerned about is where they're going to sleep. Gu Junqing couldn't help but smile wryly at this. The second sister will be fine, Lu Qingyi said with extreme confidence, then shook her head. That's not the issue I'm talking about. You've misunderstood me. I mean, can you resolve this situation perfectly? Chapter 1160. Perfectly solve this matter? Gu Junqing arched an eyebrow. He understood Lu Qingyi's intent. She wanted him to handle the situation for Gu Hanyan. She was asking him to eliminate the assassins without causing any fallout, keeping the incident limited to their small circle. This was easier said than done. Setting aside the number of assassins hiding on this cruise ship, simply finding them all would be a monumental task. Furthermore, what benefit did he gain from doing this? It would only invite unnecessary trouble. Gu Hanyan's favorability toward him was already sky-high. Refusing wouldn't change that. Protecting the person Gu Hanyan was escorting was already fulfilling his duty and honoring their bond. If someone else had approached him, demanding he cede his territory and solve their problems, he wouldn't have given them a second glance. Third sister, you overestimate me. Simply protecting you and the second sister is difficult enough as it is, Gu Junqing replied with a smile. Lu Qingyi fell silent for a moment. Having spent so much time together, she knew this man well and understood the subtext of his words immediately. He was telling her that he only cared about her and Gu Hanyan, and he had no intention of bothering with anyone else's affairs. I understand, Lu Qingyi said with a nod. She wouldn't blame Gu Junqing for this. Their private time together had given her a deeper insight into his nature. He actively created and enjoyed his life, adapting to every challenge with ease and maintaining excellent interpersonal relationships. He could show immense tenderness to the people he loved, making everyone he encountered feel as comfortable as a spring breeze. Yet, he was also a man of supreme indifference. Beneath his gentle exterior, he never invested real emotion into outside matters, making terms like utilitarian and selfish seem applicable to him. Regardless of his complex nature, Lu Qingyi found herself falling more and more in love with him. She adored every aspect of him, faults and all. Above all, she was captivated by his appearance. His strikingly handsome face and body were irresistible, even during the time when she had zero interest in, or even detested, men. Lu Qingyi stared at Gu Junqing's face with great fascination. His handsomeness had completely reset her threshold for what defined human beauty. How could the male celebrities in the entertainment industry, who relied on makeup and plastic surgery, ever compare to him? After being brought to bliss multiple times by Gu Junqing's hands and mouth, her heart had shifted entirely toward him. Her androphobia and past shadows had all but vanished. While she still viewed other men with disgust, it was a vast improvement from before. It was no wonder they said there was only one path to a woman's heart. Gu Junqing had expected Lu Qingyi to pressure him, beg him, or perhaps even curse him. He never imagined she would simply say, I understand. Understand what? He was actually willing to do it. Gu Junqing felt a wave of frustration. It wasn't that he couldn't agree to the request. While there were no obvious benefits on the surface, he could easily create some for himself. For example, if Lu Qingyi promised to let him go all the way, and since Ji Hanyan would also be indebted to him, he could have a double reward with the sisters. Although Lu Qingyi had been well serviced these past few days, his own desires were still burning. Instead, she just stared blankly at his face after a single "I understand," completely ignoring the crisis her sister was in. Chapter 1161. Just as Gu Junqing was pondering how to get Lu Qingyi to willingly agree to his request without losing face, ding! The sound of the elevator arriving echoed through the quiet corridor, instantly capturing the attention of Gu Junqing and the others. As the elevator doors slowly opened, the woman who stepped out first made Lu Qingyi, Gu Junqing, and Dao Tianyan's eyes light up. Second sister, Lu Qingyi didn't hesitate to rush forward with a look of pleasant surprise. She hadn't been able to suppress her joy since hearing that her second sister was also on this cruise ship. It had been a long time since she had seen her sister. Although she trusted her sister's abilities, her missions always resulted in a total lack of communication, which made her worry. After checking Ji Hanyan to ensure she had no injuries, she immediately wrapped her arms around her in a tight embrace. Ji Hanyan was just as happy to see her third sister. Seeing her acting like a child in need of a hug, she couldn't help but sigh helplessly as she embraced her back. However, the look on her face clearly showed how much she doted on her third sister. Someone else had originally intended to excitedly rush forward to hug Ji Hanyan, looking as though he intended to scoop Lu Qingyi up as well. However, he was quickly blocked. Eighth brother, you're growing up now. Hugging and holding is a job for the brother-in-law. You just need to be a good boy and listen. Gu Junqing said earnestly to him. What the hell does it have to do with you? It's my sister, I can hug her whenever I want. Dao Tianyan glared at Gu Junqing with seething rage. He really wanted to punch this bastard in the face and smash it to pieces. That way, his sisters wouldn't be bewitched by him anymore. At that thought, his hands itched, and he felt a sudden urge to make a move. How could it not concern me? I am your brother-in-law, after all. What's wrong with an elder teaching a younger brother a lesson? Gu Junqing seemed to read Dao Tianyan's mind, raising an eyebrow with a playful smile as he spoke calmly. Although he didn't believe Dao Tianyan would actually dare to make a move, he became slightly more alert. That's enough. Ji Hanyan walked over with her long legs, effectively stopping the two from escalating. She also shot a glance at Lu Qingyi, her expression clearly asking, how could you let these two stay together? Lu Qingyi seemed to understand, sticking out her tongue playfully. In front of her sister, this big celebrity always revealed the side of her that was still just a little girl. Seeing his second sister approach, Dao Tianyan abandoned his rash impulses. He huffed at Gu Junqing before turning to Ji Hanyan with a bright smile. He hadn't seen Ji Hanyan for many days, and he felt she had become even more beautiful. She radiated a mature and alluring charm that stirred his heart more than any other woman. This was his beautiful second sister, truly, his own sister. Second sister, are you hurt? When I heard the news earlier, I almost couldn't stop myself from going down to help you. Dao Tianyan asked with concern. I'm not, don't worry. Rest assured, I'll be fine. Ji Hanyan quickly comforted him. As for Gu Junqing, the two exchanged a subtle glance before moving on. Since they were currently on a mission, there were too many eyes around, and she couldn't afford to chat with him. More importantly, she feared that if they talked too much, Dao Tianyan would discover something. For some reason, Ji Hanyan felt a sense of guilt while talking to Dao. It felt like she was flirting with another man right in front of her husband. Ji Hanyan quickly shook those wicked thoughts away, thinking that, by rights, Gu Junqing should be her husband anyway. Sister Ji. Chapter 1162. Sister Ji. Lin Xue saw that Ji Hanyan was speaking affectionately with those outside, so she felt relieved and stepped out. After being rescued by Ji Hanyan, she trusted her above all others. Having just been saved by her daring intervention, her eyes were practically sparkling as she looked at her savior. Gu Junqing and the others turned their attention toward Lin Xue. At the moment he caught sight of her clear, exquisite beauty, Gu Junqing's eyes brightened. His first thought was, she's so fair. So fair, Gu Junqing murmured, unable to stop himself. Her skin resembled milky white pearls, ice-cold and jade-boned, flawless and intoxicating. She was truly as delicate as an autumn stream, her jade-like skin swaying in the breeze. What did you say? Lu Qingyi turned to look at him, suspicious. She hadn't caught his quiet mumbling, only that he was talking to himself. Nothing. Ahem, third sister, about that request of yours. I've agreed to it. Gu Junqing quickly regained his composure, speaking with an air of seriousness. A request. That's right. My previous words might have caused a misunderstanding. Second sister's affairs are my own, so how could I not agree? I will resolve the situation on this cruise ship, and ensure no small matters disrupt everyone's enjoyment. Gu Junqing maintained a stern, untouchable attitude, speaking with righteous indignation. You aren't interested in second sister's target, are you? Lu Qingyi grew increasingly suspicious of his motives. I am acting with complete sincerity, so do not slander my innocence. Besides, this is what you asked me to do. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Gu Junqing looked displeased. Is that so? Lu Qingyi didn't say anything further. With her and her second sister keeping watch, she didn't believe for a second that Gu Junqing could hook up with the target, Ji Hanyan. Dao Tianyan's eyes also brightened when he saw Lin Xue. She was a great beauty on par with his sisters, It wasn't common to see someone of such caliber. The last beauty he had seen who could compare to his sisters was Ye Peng. At the thought of Ye Peng, that crossdresser, the smile on Dao Tianyan's face stiffened, and he felt a wave of nausea. Thinking back to how he almost slept with that man, his fleeting interest in Lin Xue faded significantly. He was terrified of encountering another crossdresser like that again. He decided that his own sisters, whom he knew inside and out, were much better. Let me introduce you. This is Lin Xue, my target for this mission. After saying this, Gu Junqing hesitated for a moment before adding, and she is my friend. Getting along with Lin Xue had been quite pleasant, they conversed well. Gu Junqing practically considered Lin Xue half a friend already. Besides, introducing her only as a mission target felt a bit impolite. Upon hearing this, the stars in Lin Xue's eyes shone even brighter as she looked at Gu Junqing. Seeing this, Lu Qingyi narrowed her eyes, losing any desire to get to know Lin Xue. Usually, when a beautiful woman meets another, her first instinct might be to pick out faults thinking, she may be fairer than me, but I'm thinner, or her nose bridge is higher, but my eyes are bigger. Upon sensing that Gu Junqing had developed a hint of curiosity toward the other woman, she was already very annoyed. She could share Gu Junqing with her sisters, but that didn't mean she could share him with women from the outside. Now that this woman was trying to steal her sister away, Lu Qingyi felt a sense of threat. Naturally, her attitude toward her took a turn for the worse. Chapter 1163. This is my brother, Dao Tianyan. Gu Junqing began introducing the others to Lin Xue, gesturing toward him. Dao Tianyan nodded slightly without speaking. After his previous experience, he was extremely cautious about interpersonal relationships, terrified of encountering another situation like the one with Ye Peng. This is my sister, Lu. Gu Junqing shifted her gaze to Lu Qingyi. I know. You're Lu Qingyi, the pop diva. I'm a huge fan. I love listening to your albums, and have even collected many of your out-of-print editions. Lin Xue was quite excited, looking every bit the little fangirl meeting her idol. Is that so? Should I sign an autograph for you later? Lu Qingyi asked with a playful, teasing smile. Seeing that Lin Xue was a fan, her hostility toward the woman began to dissipate. Yes, please. Lin Xue felt relieved as she saw Lu Qingyi smile. She wasn't a naive young girl anymore. She had spent years navigating the business world, and she had clearly sensed the look in Lu Qingyi's eyes earlier. Although she didn't know why Lu Qingyi was dissatisfied with her, she had no desire to cause conflict. This is the ham, Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing shifted her gaze to him. She hesitated to introduce him further. If she claimed he was her brother-in-law, Dao Tianyan would likely explode. To prevent another fight, she simply stated his name. Nice to meet you, Mr. Gu. Lin Xue looked at Gu Junqing with newfound gravity, and gave a respectful bow. She knew that whether or not she could stay here to hide from the assassins depended largely on his word, so she dared not be careless. Miss Lin, there's no need to be so formal. Since you are a friend of my second sister, you are a friend of mine. If you need anything in the future, you can come to me, Gu Junqing said with a smile. Lu Qingyi curled her lip, mentally cursing him as a scumbag. Although his words were polite, and seemed to strike a balance between friendliness and distance, she felt certain he was already plotting to win Lin Xue over. It was a woman's intuition. Thank you. Lin Xue looked up at Gu Junqing with genuine gratitude. It was the first time she had dared to look directly at his face, and the moment she did, she froze in place. What a face that was! His clean, fair skin and distinct, deep facial contours exuded a touch of cold handsomeness. His eyes, deep as the ocean, held a mesmerizing hue, and his every feature spoke of nobility and elegance. His lips curved into a perfect arc, seemingly permanently set in a gentle smile. That smile could pierce the clouds like a sudden ray of sunshine, warm, calm, and divine. In that instant, the panic and fear of being hunted all vanished into thin air. 4 lines of poetry surfaced in her heart. This noble sun seems only to exist in paintings. I alone know the hidden path here. Tracing the water to the edge of the sky, he surely is no dweller of the mortal realm. Lin Xue's reaction was within everyone's expectations. Gu Junqing simply smiled warmly. Lu Qingyi just curled her lip, wearing a look of disdain. She hadn't been that infatuated the first time she met Gu Junqing. As for Dao Tianyan, his composure was shattered. His mouth twitched with unbridled jealousy. When Lin Xue saw him earlier, she hadn't reacted at all. Yet now, upon seeing Gu Junqing, she was completely mesmerized. Was his face really that inferior to Gu Junqing's? Chapter 1164. Gu Junqing noticed Lin Xue staring at him, but he didn't react beyond keeping a warm smile on his face. However, a glimmer of gold flashed briefly in his eyes. Heroine Lin Xue. Identity wife of the war god Ying Chen, though the two have yet to interact. Age 24. Charm 94. Skin like congealed fat. Delicate jade bones, pure as ice and snow. Affection for host 26. Admiration and curiosity for the host's appearance. Heroine Halo 6205. So she really was a heroine? Gu Junqing's eyes deepened instantly upon seeing this information. But this were god character. Could this be one of those stories where the hero leaves home for 5 years, returns to find his wife suffering humiliation, and his daughter living in a doghouse, and then the war god flies into a rage, orders a massacre, and commands 10,000 soldiers to descend from the sky? Gu Junqing's mouth twitched slightly at the thought. Even though these plotlines were incredibly cringeworthy, it had to be said that they attracted a massive audience. They even spawned countless memes, like the ones where the wife is forced to work in a brothel, the war god gets angry, and 10,000 soldiers descend just to patronize her business. Gu Junqing sank into his thoughts, while Lin Xue remained lost in the sheer magnitude of his stunning appearance. To observers like Lu Qingyi, Ji Hanyan, and Dao Tianyan, the two looked as if they were locked in an affectionate, love-at-first-sight gaze. Ding. Host has caused the protagonist Dao Tianyan to feel jealousy. Host has plundered 100 points of his protagonist fortune. Host's villain fortune plus 100. Ding. Host has caused the protagonist Dao Tianyan to feel jealousy. Host has plundered 100 points of his protagonist fortune. Host's villain fortune plus 100. Dao Tianyan felt his eyes burning with genuine envy. He wasn't bad-looking himself, so why were all the women looking at Gu Junqing? Even his own sisters would inevitably cast their gaze toward Gu Junqing whenever he was around. How could he not feel jealous? Even though he didn't have much interest in Lin Xue, she was undoubtedly a stunning beauty. Seeing her fall for Gu Junqing at first sight made Dao Tianyan feel increasingly bitter inside. He would feel jealous even if a close brother of his was liked by such a beauty. He was afraid of his brother having a hard life, but even more afraid of him striking it rich. Not to mention, Gu Junqing was the person he despised most in this lifetime. He was going crazy with envy. Damn it, I am going to get plastic surgery, and I will have it done to look exactly like this bastard Gu Junqing. Dao Tianyan roared internally. Ji Hanyan didn't react much. It wasn't that she didn't care about Gu Junqing, but she knew Lin Xue was married. Based on her brief understanding of Lin Xue, she didn't seem like the type to be a floozy. As for Gu Junqing, she didn't believe he would try to hit on a married woman, would he? Ahem, Miss Lin. Lu Qingyi finally lost her patience and gave a light cough to break Lin Xue out of her trance. Ah. Lin Xue turned to look at Lu Qingyi with a dull expression, only then realizing she had been staring blankly at Gu Junqing. Her face flushed a deep crimson instantly. She hurriedly bowed to apologize to Gu Junqing. She had never seen such a handsome man in her entire life. He looked so monstrously attractive it was beyond description. It's fine, it's fine. Even I often find myself staring blankly, wondering how someone in this world could be this handsome, Gu Junqing said, raising an eyebrow and feigning narcissism. At these words, Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan both rolled their eyes. Dao Tianyan, meanwhile, was still busy contemplating the possibility of plastic surgery, and didn't even notice Gu Junqing's antics. However, this successfully dispelled Lin Xue's embarrassment, and she covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. Ding. Heroine Lin Xue's affection for the host has increased by 4 points. Current affection, 30, slightly favorable. Chapter 1165. Alright, since everyone has been introduced, there's no need to say much more. We need to figure out how to handle this situation. Ji Hanyan interrupted them with a serious expression and analyzed the matter earnestly. Even here isn't safe. Those killers are all skilled, so finding an opportunity to board won't be difficult, especially since they are all armed. I even suspect that if they can't eliminate Lin Xue personally, they might just blow up the cruise ship. Upon hearing this, Lin Xue's face showed a flicker of panic and guilt. She never imagined they would be so deranged. The thought that her situation might result in the deaths of everyone on board left her feeling incredibly uneasy. However, the expressions on Dao Tianyan and Gu Junqing's faces remained unchanged. Gu Junqing had experienced far worse than just a cruise ship bombing. He had even been through plane bombings before. Dao Tianyan was the same. As the dignified Azura king, he had seen more than his fair share of explosions and slaughter. Those killers didn't even have the qualifications to carry his shoes compared to what he had faced. Do they really dare to offend the Xia kingdom? Lu Qingyi couldn't help but ask. If it were just an assassination, the Xia officials might not get involved. But blowing up a cruise ship was a completely different matter. Don't think for a second that fleeing the country means you can escape. Unless you live completely off the grid and hide in the deep wilderness, there is no way to truly get away. There are smaller nations surrounding the Xia kingdom, and many criminals think they can escape justice by fleeing there. But a single wanted poster from Xia is enough to make the leaders of those countries rush to capture and hand them over. So, she didn't believe these people would actually dare to bomb the ship. Hey, you don't know the inside story. Do you really think these people are ordinary assassins? Not only is the bounty astronomical, but the background behind this. Ji Hanyan left it at that. But Lu Qingyi knew there was information here that she wasn't privy to. Beside them, Lin Xue felt increasingly guilty. But she had no idea how she had brought such disaster upon herself. Her family consisted only of her father and mother, who were at most middle class. How could they possibly have the status to offend the powerful figures hunting her? Gu Junqing stood by, deep in thought. It was certain that Lin Xue had been dragged into this because of that war god. Clearly, the war god's enemies were no ordinary people, and they must have known about the relationship between Lin Xue and the war god. What are you thinking about? Ji Hanyan couldn't help but cast her gaze toward Gu Junqing. Right now, the only person who could perfectly resolve this matter was likely Gu Junqing. It's nothing. I'll take care of this. I have a few subordinates with decent skills who specialize in this line of work. I'll have them step in and resolve it. Gu Junqing looked at Ji Hanyan and said casually. Those men had been sent to his side by his grandfather. Although he didn't need protection, his grandfather held him in high regard, especially after Gu Junqing had personally handled the remnants of the Dark Castle last time. Whenever he was away from the capital, his grandfather would assign several Grandmaster-level experts to protect him and follow his orders. It was meant to spare Gu Junqing from having to handle things himself. These people were professionals. They could even pick up the scent of an ordinary person, and anyone who had blood on their hands wouldn't escape their perception. Nearby, Dao Tianyan saw his second sister asking Gu Junqing instead of him, and his eyes had already turned red with envy. He made a silent vow to himself he would resolve this matter, and then claim the credit from his second sister. Chapter 1166. Alright, I also have a few colleagues. Let me have them help you out as well. Seeing Gu Junqing willingly agree, Ji Hanyan breathed a small sigh of relief. She was primarily worried that if those assassins failed to capture Lin Xue, they would be driven to desperate measures and blow up the entire cruise ship. If Gu Junqing was willing to intervene, she would feel a bit more at ease. Although he was a bit unreliable when it came to women, he should have no problem handling matters like this. Rest assured, I will handle this matter. Gu Junqing nodded slightly. When Lin Xue heard Gu Junqing speak with such confidence about resolving the issue, her eyes filled with a dazzling brilliance as she gazed at him. Even Ji Hanyan, whose strength she considered formidable, would find it difficult to locate the assassins within the crowd. Yet, Gu Junqing could actually do it. Thank you. I will give you whatever reward you desire. Ji Hanyan's eyes turned coquettish for a moment, and she gazed at Gu Junqing with profound meaning. A reward? What kind of reward? Dao Tianyan became instantly alert upon hearing this, his gaze filled with growing rage as he looked at Gu Junqing. He secretly speculated in his heart. Could his second sister and Gu Junqing have made some private deal, where Gu Junqing demanded some improper request from her? Gu Junqing, did you threaten my second sister into agreeing to something? Dao Tianyan suddenly flew into a rage at the thought. Looking at his demeanor, it seemed that if anything went wrong, he would resort to violence immediately. What does that have to do with you? Gu Junqing let out a cold laugh. I'll kill you. Seeing that Gu Junqing didn't refute him, Dao Tianyan's mind was instantly consumed by fury, and he prepared to attack regardless of the consequences. Slap. A crisp sound of a slap echoed through the corridor. Dao Tianyan's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Ji Hanyan. He couldn't believe his second sister had actually hit him. Even when he was at his most mischievous as a child, she had never laid a hand on him. Whenever he made a mistake, she would gently coax him and ask him to apologize to the teachers at the orphanage. But now, his second sister had struck him directly. A wave of grievance and bitterness washed over Dao Tianyan. It made even the Azure King, a man hardened by countless trials of war, feel a prickle of heat behind his eyes. Are you sober now? Ji Hanyan's expression was calm, her voice cold. Second sister, I asked you, are you sober now? Ji Hanyan's face turned increasingly cold, her voice rising as if soaked in frost, as she spoke every word with biting clarity. I am. Dao Tianyan replied, bowing his head in grievance. Is this the time for such outbursts? How many people on this entire cruise ship might lose their lives just because we wasted this time? How can you still have the mind to bicker with others? Ji Hanyan rebuked him sharply. Lin Xue wanted to smooth things over, but as an outsider, she didn't dare to intervene. Lu Qingyi, standing by the side, was dumbfounded. Even she had never seen her second sister get so angry before. All right. Eighth brother was just trying to show his concern for you. Now is the time to resolve the situation, so please stop being angry. Lu Qingyi quickly pacified Ji Hanyan, before turning her voice sharply toward Dao Tianyan. Why aren't you apologizing to second sister yet? Second sister, I'm sorry. Dao Tianyan dared not argue with Ji Hanyan, so he quickly lowered his head to apologize with the utmost sincerity. If it were anyone else, he would never have stooped to apologizing like this. But his second sister was different. He knew that if he didn't apologize, she might really ignore him. Apologize to Gu Junqing. Ji Hanyan pointed a slender finger toward Gu Junqing and commanded coldly. Ha. Chapter 1167. Go and apologize to Gu Junqing. Ji Hanyan pointed a slender finger at Gu Junqing, speaking coldly to Dao Tianyan. Me? Apologize to him? Impossible. Dao Tianyan roared, his eyes nearly tearing up. Why do you favor him, second sister? Why does every sister favor him? He looked like a child who had been wronged by those he loved most, despite doing nothing wrong. He didn't understand why all his sisters favored Gu Junqing, when he was simply worried about them being deceived and threatened by him. The Azure King, who had weathered storms in the outside world, finally began to break down. He was clearly their most beloved younger brother, so why had the attitude of his 5 sisters completely changed ever since Gu Junqing arrived? In the past, they would never have scolded him, and they would have stood by his side whenever something happened. It was nothing like now, where they all stood on Gu Junqing's side. It is because you do not know how to judge the time and occasion. Is this really the time to be saying these things? Ji Hanyan asked, her expression growing colder. The situation over there hasn't been handled yet, and you want to stir up internal strife and fight Gu Junqing. Are you not at fault? Also, your sisters are not fools. You don't need to manage what we need or don't need. Do you understand? Ji Hanyan's expression grew colder and colder. In the past, she hadn't wanted to manage so much, as even though Dao Tianyan was hostile toward Gu Junqing, their conflict had been controlled within a certain degree. But his behavior today was simply too excessive. Not only was he bossing her around, but he was being completely irresponsible toward all the passengers on the entire cruise ship. For Ji Hanyan, who had always placed the most importance on her responsibilities, this was intolerable. Gu Junqing blinked on the side. The occurrence of this scene didn't surprise him too much. It could be said that it was within his expectations, despite being outside of common sense. He just hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. There was no doubt that Dao Tianyan's hostility toward him would sooner or later lead to the seven sisters feeling disgusted with him. Even if all seven sisters pampered Dao Tianyan and viewed him as a younger brother, that was only when there was no competition. If they had to choose between their lover and their younger brother, the sisters would try their best to restrain the conflict between them. However, if a real conflict occurred, they wouldn't favor one person too much, but they would certainly blame the person who started the conflict first. For example, in a fight, the police usually arrest the person who threw the first punch. That was why Gu Junqing never initiated a conflict himself. He merely used sarcasm to provoke Dao Tianyan's emotions. As a son of destiny, who was nearly invincible from the start, whether in status or ability, Dao Tianyan had never endured such treatment, so he naturally couldn't help himself. Fortunately, Gu Junqing's repeated patience was not without reward. The current situation had basically broken the balance between him and Dao Tianyan in the hearts of the sisters. It was like a seesaw, with him and Dao Tianyan on opposite sides, and the sisters sitting in the middle, trying their best to maintain the balance. But the conflicts that Dao Tianyan repeatedly initiated had already caused the sisters to begin sliding in Gu Junqing's direction. Sooner or later, they would one day slide into Gu Junqing's arms. The trend was already there, and that day was not far off. Dao Tianyan looked at Ji Hanyan's cold eyes, and he knew he had no choice but to apologize. He looked at Lu Qingyi with a dazed expression, seeking some support from his third sister. But Lu Qingyi merely glanced at him with her beautiful eyes before sighing and turning to talk to Lin Xue, who had been afraid to speak. Despair and helplessness flashed across Dao Tianyan's eyes instantly. He knew his third sister no longer wanted to help him. If he could, he would never want to lower his head to the bastard who had stolen so much attention from his seven sisters. Chapter 1168. Facing Ji Hanyan's cold gaze, Dao Tianyan had no choice but to bow his head and apologize to Gu Junqing with deep helplessness. "It's fine. I won't take it to heart," Gu Junqing said with feigned magnanimity. Gu Junqing. Ji Hanyan shot another sharp look at him. She was clearly dissatisfied with him provoking Dao Tianyan again. "All right, I'll stop," Gu Junqing said, spreading his hands. He knew that Ji Hanyan would not only police Dao Tianyan's behavior, but would no longer let him off the hook for provoking his rival either. However, this didn't mean their relationship would soften. On the contrary, it would only deepen their covert struggle. In fact, their private battles would likely become increasingly bloody. It might eventually evolve into a full-scale conflict between their respective factions. Yet, Gu Junqing wasn't worried. This might actually provide a better opportunity for him to plunder Dao Tianyan's destiny points. On the surface, Dao Tianyan had to play nice. Even if he were furious, he would have to swallow his anger and could no longer lash out at Gu Junqing. "Good. Since you've both chosen to keep the peace, don't blame me for being ruthless if either of you starts a conflict again," Ji Hanyan said with satisfaction. She then took Lin Xue and Lu Qingyi to the rooms Gu Junqing had arranged for them. They needed to rest and reorganize before dealing with the remaining assassins. Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan locked eyes for a brief moment. Both of their expressions were grim. While Gu Junqing was fine, Dao Tianyan's face was as dark as a gathering storm, truly terrible to behold. This was the first time in his life he had ever bowed his head to anyone. As the dignified Azura king, he had made countless enemies kneel, and he had never had to concede to anyone, especially not to the person he loathed the most. If he found the chance, he would definitely not let Gu Junqing off the hook. However, he didn't dare disobey Ji Hanyan's orders. Since he couldn't openly deal with Gu Junqing, Dao Tianyan stopped focusing on the man himself and turned his attention to Gu Junqing's power base. If he could systematically dismantle Gu Junqing's influence, surely the man wouldn't be able to show his face before his sisters anymore. After staring daggers at Gu Junqing, he let out a cold snort and turned toward the elevator. Since his second sister cared so much about the ordinary people on this cruise ship, he was willing to help her resolve the matter. Perhaps then, she would forgive him. Gu Junqing let out a light laugh, his face maintaining an air of calm indifference. However, his smile was bottomless, and his eyes were like an endless abyss that no one could fathom. "Second sister, by forcing them to suppress this, aren't you worried that their conflict will just boil over later?" Lu Qingyi knew that the relationship between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan wasn't just poor, it was like fire and water. That was why she usually chose not to interfere with them. She only intervened when it looked like they were genuinely about to trade blows. She normally just tried to resolve their misunderstandings. But by forcing them to stand down like this, their resentment would continue to accumulate until it reached a breaking point. "Why do you think they are in conflict?" Ji Hanyan sighed and asked slowly. "Because Dao Tianyan can't stand Gu Junqing. He thinks he's a scumbag who, had an improper relationship with the seventh sister." Lu Qingyi hesitated before speaking. "No, the source of their conflict is us." Chapter 1169. "No, the point of their conflict is us. Whether you haven't realized it or just don't want to admit it, that boy Dao Tianyan might secretly be in love with all seven of us." Ji Hanyan sighed slightly, a complex look in her eyes. Although she had a good opinion of Dao Tianyan, her childhood companion and younger brother, she never had those kinds of feelings for him. She only looked after him like a younger brother. Not many people survived that accident at the orphanage. She cherished every one of them. Lu Qingyi fell silent for a long time after hearing this, then sighed. Because Dao Tianyan had been busy with urgent matters recently, he rarely appeared by her side. She truly hadn't noticed it at the time. But after setting sail, she noticed the burning, obsessed look in Dao Tianyan's eyes, and suddenly realized what kind of feelings this younger brother held for her. At first, she didn't want to expose it or say anything. She didn't know how she should face him anymore. But now that her second sister had brought it up, she could only answer with silence. She didn't want to accept the fact. Two male lions fight not just to compete for territory, but to fight for the lioness, to claim the right to choose a mate. This biological instinct is something even humans, who claim to be a superior species, cannot escape. Both of them are very capable men. Unless one of them gives up, their conflict will not end, and even my attempt to suppress it just now will be useless. Seeing that Lu Qingyi remained silent, Gu Junqing understood what she was thinking. Although her younger sister seemed proud and haughty, she was actually prone to escapism, wanting to flee whenever she encountered situations that were difficult to decide or let go of. Perhaps it stemmed from the negative experiences of the past with the Dark Castle, which left her feeling pessimistic and uncertain about the future, causing her to feel anxious about things beyond her personal control. Thus, she felt a sense of guilt in her own heart. If she hadn't chosen her third sister to go undercover back then, would her personality be different now? So, if the conflict between them becomes unavoidable, even to the point where they must decide who lives and who dies, who would you choose? Gu Junqing looked deeply at Lu Qingyi, ultimately asking this cruel question. When the conflict between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan can no longer be reconciled, they will inevitably ignite countless struggles, and it might truly become a life-or-death battle. This is already an imminent problem. Must I choose? Lu Qingyi's eyes were filled with confusion. Third sister, the human heart cannot be like a fair scale. Even parents inevitably show bias toward their children, and if you don't choose, the one who survives might not be the person you value most in your heart. Gu Junqing said earnestly. Although she was admonishing Lu Qingyi this way, she herself was struggling deep down. Then, second sister, have you decided? There was pain in Lu Qingyi's eyes. One of them, despite having no blood relation, was treated as a younger brother, while the other was the lover, who led her out of the shadows, and brought her various emotional experiences, such as love, passion, excitement, joy, and unease. If possible, she really didn't want to make such a cruel choice. Gu Junqing looked at Lu Qingyi, but did not speak. I understand. Lu Qingyi knew that Gu Junqing had chosen Gu Junqing, and this conversation was also out of concern that she might make the wrong choice. After all, Gu Junqing had been out on missions, and did not know how far things had progressed between her and Gu Junqing. Of course, no one can say for sure what the future holds. Perhaps Dao Tianyan will give up his obsession one day. Chapter 1170. By the way, how is your relationship with Gu Junqing going? It's been so many days, I don't believe he hasn't made a move on you. After they finished discussing the heavy topic, Gu Junqing suddenly smiled. However, there was a touch of mischief in her expression, as if she were looking forward to teasing her younger sister. She had entrusted Lu Qingyi to Gu Junqing a while back, not just so he could help cure her androphobia, but also with the intention of bringing them together. Although she didn't want to leverage her own feelings for Gu Junqing to pressure her sisters, Lu Qingyi was a special case. She felt that without her interference, given Lu Qingyi's initial impression of him, it would be far too difficult for them to reach a happy ending. Lu Qingyi's exquisite, flawless face flushed red, and she stammered, unable to find the words. Although she had been mentally prepared to share Gu Junqing with her sisters, actually speaking about it felt impossible. Don't tell me you've already slept with him? Gu Junqing had only intended to tease her, but seeing Lu Qingyi's hesitant reaction, she was instantly furious. How many days had it been since she last checked? Did Gu Junqing have to make progress this fast? She had initially thought that because her sister suffered from androphobia, even with Gu Junqing's immense charm, he wouldn't be able to make any significant headway. She believed she, the authoritative older sister, would still need to step in to help. She had already been surprised to see Lu Qingyi and Gu Junqing on the cruise ship together. Now seeing Lu Qingyi's reaction, it was clear that they had developed an intimate relationship. Even though she was prepared for this, and had even planned it herself, she still felt a twinge of resentment, as if her own cabbage had been raided. She immediately stood up, intending to go find Gu Junqing. No. Seeing that Gu Junqing was about to march off to find him, Lu Qingyi quickly pulled her back. It took a great deal of explanation to finally persuade her to sit down. I didn't expect that guy to be so capable. After listening to Lu Qingyi recount the many ways Gu Junqing had helped her and the progress they had made, Gu Junqing's expression became complicated. She had always felt guilty about sending Lu Qingyi on the undercover mission, which had forced her to witness so many human tragedies. Seeing that Gu Junqing had handled this latest matter so perfectly put her mind at ease. Just as Lu Qingyi and Gu Junqing were whispering about things only sisters could share, a sound came from the room's bathroom. The two women immediately fell silent. There was nothing they couldn't discuss between themselves, even when talking about Gu Junqing or Dao Tianyan, but there was no need for an outsider to hear it. Regardless, this was their family business. A moment later, Lin Xue, who had been bathing, emerged. Her long, black hair hung wet over her shoulders, water droplets clinging to her jade-like cheeks. Her posture was graceful, wrapped in a hazy aura. Although Lin Xue had been beautiful before, she had been tossing and turning for days and barely had time to sleep, let alone bathe. While she didn't smell, neither her mind nor her body had been in top condition. Her earlier pleasantries with Gu Junqing and the others had been an act of sheer willpower. After following Gu Junqing's suggestion to take a bath, she emerged looking radiant, like a lotus flower rising from the water. You really are a little beauty. Could it be that those assassins were targeting you because of your looks? Ji Hanyan had grown quite familiar with Lin Xue, so she smiled and made a light-hearted joke. Sister, please, don't tease me. If you want to talk about beauty, you and the heavenly Queen Lu are much more beautiful than I am. Lin Xue gave a bitter smile. There's no need to call me heavenly Queen Lu. We are about the same age, just call me by my name. Seeing that Ji Hanyan had such a friendly attitude toward Lin Xue, Lu Qingyi softened her own demeanor and waved her hand dismissively. Qingyi. Lin Xue hesitated for a moment before tentatively calling out Lu Qingyi's name. Even though she was a fan, she didn't really know her personally. Seeing that the woman was so easygoing about titles, she finally felt at ease. Chapter 1171. The three women were of similar age and appearance, and it didn't take long for them to hit it off while chatting. Just then, a knock suddenly sounded at the door. Lin Xue bristled like a startled bird, instantly becoming alert. Although Ji Hanyan and Lu Qingyi believed that with Gu Junqing and many crew members on guard, it was impossible for any assassins to enter the luxury cabin, they still grew serious and prepared to act. It's me, Gu Junqing. The person outside seemed to sense the movement within, and Gu Junqing's lazy, magnetic voice drifted into the room. The words rolled off his tongue like a cool breeze on a summer night, rustling the treetops. It brought a sense of comfort and serenity that lulled one's defenses. Yet, heard up close, that same voice carried an indescribable charm. Every syllable uttered from his thin lips was imbued with a magnetic allure that made the heart race. Especially when out of sight, free from the distraction of his looks, his voice seemed all the more mysterious and captivating. Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan were accustomed to his voice, merely lamenting that it was a waste for him not to be a superstar. Lin Xue, having only met him once, was still entirely unfamiliar with him. Suddenly confronted by a man of such unparalleled, mysterious charm, she naturally found it difficult to resist. Hearing his voice alone, she felt a slight shiver run through her body, as if he had struck the depths of her soul. In her mind, a scene suddenly emerged of herself lying beneath Gu Junqing, hearing him gasp from exertion right beside her ear. The scorching heat and imagined sounds flushed her flawless, pale face a soft shade of pink. Lin Xue herself didn't know why, but simply hearing his voice had conjured such a shameful image. Beside her, Lu Qingyi glanced at Lin Xue from the corner of her eye, her expression inscrutable. She knew that yet another girl was about to fall under the charm of this bastard, Gu Junqing. Why couldn't this jerk be a little uglier? And this Lin Xue, getting so flustered just from hearing a voice. If the two of them got any closer, would she just lose her mind entirely? Lu Qingyi ground her teeth in frustration. She had started to like Lin Xue a bit, but now that feeling was gone. Ji Hanyan remained much more composed, stepping forward to open the door and let Gu Junqing in. Miss Lin, are you finding your stay comfortable? Gu Junqing walked in, his posture as straight as a pine, and politely inquired about Lin Xue's well-being. Seeing Gu Junqing act this way, Lu Qingyi didn't just want to grind her teeth, she wanted to bite him. When had he ever been this polite to her? This lecherous, pretentious bastard. Ah, yes, it's very comfortable here. Lin Xue was stunned for a moment, then blushed as she hurried to reply. Her heart was pounding like a drum. It was the first time she had ever felt this kind of flutter, a mix of novelty and excitement. As she looked at Gu Junqing, a strange emotion gradually into her eyes. Facing such an outstanding and well-mannered man, she felt there couldn't possibly be a woman who wouldn't be moved. Let's skip the pleasantries. How is the situation? Ji Hanyan didn't waste time, asking Gu Junqing directly. She wasn't too concerned about whether a spark might form between Gu Junqing and Lin Xue, as there were far more pressing matters at hand. Chapter 1172. Rest assured, do you still not trust me? Gu Junqing sat down casually and looked at Ji Hanyan with a helpless expression. I really don't, Ji Hanyan retorted, rolling her eyes at him with a mix of blame and annoyance. Although she had mentally prepared herself regarding the relationship between Gu Junqing and Lu Qingyi, her feelings remained complicated now that it was confirmed. I have already notified the Coast Guard about the cruise ship. They have dispatched rescue teams to circle the vessel, so even if my people fail to clear out the assassins or the ship is bombed, they will arrive quickly and no one will be hurt. Gu Junqing didn't know what was bothering Ji Hanyan, so he offered this explanation. Ji Hanyan nodded with satisfaction upon hearing this. Since every contingency was covered, she felt relieved. Where is Dao Tianyan? Lu Qingyi asked abruptly from the side. He said he felt bad for you too and shouldn't have been so reckless, so he went down to help. Gu Junqing shrugged. He didn't hide anything. The two women had already leaned toward him, and they wouldn't be swayed by a single sentence anyway. Withholding the truth would only make him appear narrow-minded. Upon hearing this, the expressions of Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan grew complicated. Why is he trying to be a hero? Second sister, I'm going to bring him back. Lu Qingyi wasn't usually impatient, but she stood up and scolded, turning to leave. That's enough, come back. No need to go. Ji Hanyan closed her eyes slightly, then opened them with a sharp glint, as if she had made a firm decision. That won't work. Those assassins aren't average people. My little brother has some skills, but he's no match for them. Lu Qingyi grew anxious. Dao Tianyan wanted to play the pig to eat the tiger, pretending to be weak before surprising them later. His sisters were completely unaware that he was the Azura King, knowing only that he possessed some martial arts. They certainly didn't think he would be a match for these assassins. That's his own choice. Let's not interfere. He's not a child trailing behind us anymore. So are you going to keep managing his meals, clothes, and marriage for the rest of his life? Don't forget what we just discussed. Gu Junqing narrowed her sharp, charming phoenix eyes, her voice cold yet melancholy. She had finally come to the realization that Dao Tianyan was no longer the little boy who only knew how to act spoiled behind them. Even if they deeply cherished the bond from their time in the orphanage, they didn't need to hover over him like a mother hen. But, fine. Lu Qingyi was still hesitant, but seeing her second sister's distressed look, and recalling their earlier conversation, she sighed and sat back down. Is she finally waking up? It seems the protagonist's younger brother Aura is struggling to influence them now. Gu Junqing narrowed his eyes while listening to the conversation, thinking to himself. Dao Tianyan's luck not only lowered the intelligence of those around him, but also had a special effect on his 7 sisters. It compelled them to show him affection even greater than what they would for a biological brother. Otherwise, how could they have become so blindly devoted to him after not seeing him for so many years? The current situation clearly indicated that Dao Tianyan's luck was gradually fading, and with Gu Junqing's presence, that aura could no longer exert much influence over the 7 sisters. Chapter 1173. Night had fallen. Unlike the magnificent blue sky and sea of the daytime, the ocean grew increasingly terrifying. The deep black water seemed to swallow all light, leaving only faint moonlight and starlight to illuminate the area. The waves were no longer gentle. They surged and crashed like a raging beast wreaking havoc. Guests aboard the cruise ship continued to drink and mingle, enjoying the various amenities. Yet, no one noticed the silent bloodshed unfolding in the shadows. On the ship's rooftop, amidst the pitch-black night, 2 shadows silently climbed the exterior walls. They moved like vipers slithering through the darkness, intent on infiltrating the luxury cabin from the outside. The 2 assassins moved in tandem, maintaining a delicate distance, close enough to watch their surroundings, yet far enough to remain wary of each other. The leader wore black, his face hidden within the shadow of a hood, revealing only eyes that glimmered like a wolf's in the dark. The second figure, draped in a black robe, was petite and clearly female. Neither spoke, but madness flashed in their eyes. They knew that completing this assassination mission would guarantee a lifetime of wealth and luxury. Knowing their target was a defenseless woman only made them more reckless. They had 10,000 ways to kill an ordinary person. Even if she had a powerful protector, it wouldn't matter. The 2 had already made their plans. One would hold off the target's protector, while the other swiftly eliminated the target, splitting the reward afterward. One was ranked 54th on the assassin list, known as the Night Thorn. He had once silently slipped into a heavily guarded room of a small nation's president and assassinated him on the spot. The body was not discovered until the next day. The other, ranked 66th, was known as the Bloody Countess. She was a stunning beauty, but like all twisted individuals, she was a nymphomaniac who required a different man every day to satisfy her desires, cruelly killing them afterward. Surely, a pair like them could handle one ordinary woman. Both assassins were brimming with confidence. As they scaled the wall in silence, a cold wind blew. A nearly invisible white thread shot out, silently wrapping around the leading assassin's neck. Surprisingly, the assassin above felt nothing, continuing to climb upward as if unaware. The Bloody Countess below, having kept a close eye on her partner, immediately noticed something was wrong. Her eyes widened as she took in the situation. The Night Thorn seemed to hear something and turned his head. He felt as if time had paused. He could only see the female assassin's mouth moving, but heard no sound. What is she saying? She's not making any sense. Suddenly, his vision tilted. He felt his head falling, and then he was plunged into darkness. In an instant, his head was severed. The corpse remained stiff against the wall for a moment before plunging straight down. The Bloody Countess watched the head tumble down, the spraying blood coating her entire body like a fountain. She was no inexperienced girl, however, so she did not panic. She knew that the unseen enemy who struck her partner would not spare her. She zagged back down to the deck, pulled out a dagger, and kept her guard up, constantly checking her neck and surroundings. In her line of work, you didn't have to ignore the risk of death, but you at least had to understand how you died. As she expected, the white thread that had decapitated her partner reappeared in her vision. This time, she saw it clearly. It was not a thread at all. It was an application of pure energy. In the distance stood an old man and a youth. The elder looked to be over 50, yet his eyes shone with a sharp light. Countless strands of white vapor rose from his body, gathering in his palm to condense into a white arc. A strike as swift and piercing as a rainbow. It was this single attack that had effortlessly severed the Night Thorn's head in an instant. This a grandmaster? The Bloody Countess murmured with a bitter tone. Although definitions of strength varied by nation, some based on martial arts, others on supernatural abilities or physical mutations, the term for the peak, the elite, remained the same: grandmaster. In the martial arts world, a grandmaster was a legend, a myth, an existence that transcended mortality. Any family that produced a grandmaster could instantly rise to become a dominant clan, commanding the respect of even the highest officials and the wealthiest elites. She never expected to encounter a grandmaster, a figure rarely seen in a lifetime, on this small cruise ship. Watching the incoming white energy, the Countess collapsed to the ground, abandoning all hope of resistance. Not far away, the elder returned to his composed, indifferent demeanor after disposing of the 2 assassins. The youth beside him frowned, looking at the old man. I didn't expect these assassins to be so reckless. This is the territory of the Xia Kingdom. Do they not know of our ban on assassins and mercenaries entering our borders? The world is getting chaotic. Haven't you noticed how the martial arts factions are flourishing? There are more and more grandmasters like me, and even individuals who have surpassed the grandmaster level are appearing more frequently. The elder sighed and shook his head. Grandfather, is the world really going to descend into chaos? The youth asked, his expression pale with shock. The martial artists use their strength to defy the law. In the future, the state may not even be able to suppress those with peerless power. Take me, for example. Do you think an ordinary military company could stand against me? One day, we may even see beings capable of moving mountains and draining seas. The elder shook his head and turned to leave. Others would naturally come to clean up the blood and evidence. The youth was still imagining how powerful such beings could be, but seeing his grandfather walk away, he asked in confusion, are we not staying here to protect young Master Gu? Protect young Master Gu? The elder paused mid-step, shooting a strange look at his grandson. Ah, weren't we sent here to protect him? The youth asked, feeling embarrassed by his grandfather's gaze. Young Master Gu does not need our protection. We are only here to reduce his burdens and run errands for him. The elder chuckled, shook his head, and stopped paying attention to his grandson, resuming his stride. The youth stood there, utterly confused, until he saw his grandfather walking far ahead and hurried to catch up. Chapter 1174. The old man and his grandson searched the cruise ship, covering everything from the cabins to the bridge. With a grandmaster's keen senses, it was easy for him to identify those reeking of murderous intent. Grandfather, what exactly did you mean by that? Why doesn't young Master Gu need your protection, and is he more powerful than you? Even while hunting killers, they remained relaxed. The grandson was deeply curious and reverent, eager for news about the main branch of the Xia family. He was an affiliate of the Xia family and fascinated by everything regarding the main branch, especially Gu Junqing, the grandson pushed into the limelight by the family. Rumor had it that the Xia patriarch intended to name Gu Junqing as his successor. No, the way he was treated, he was already effectively the heir. Not only could he easily command all the Xia family's resources, but he was even assigned a grandmaster as a personal bodyguard. His grandfather was a first-rate grandmaster, hired by the Xia family as a guest of honor with a high status. Yet, he had been sent to serve as Gu Junqing's personal security. Since when did a grandmaster become a mere bodyguard? This grandson was immensely curious about how one grandson could suppress all the direct descendants of the Xia family. Initially, he thought Gu Junqing just had a handsome face that the Xia patriarch favored. Combined with the power of the Gu family, that was how he climbed to his current position. But seeing his grandfather's level of respect for Gu Junqing, the reality was clearly different from his assumptions. Perhaps there was some truth to his theories, but there was obviously more to it. A grain of rice dares to compete with the moon? My skills really can't compare to young Master Gu's. Seeing his grandson's genuine curiosity, the old man killed a lone assassin drinking nearby with a casual flick of his finger before explaining with a wry smile. When he first met Gu Junqing, he felt all the pride and confidence he had built over 20 years come crashing down. He had become a grandmaster at 65, thinking that was an incredible feat, but facing a genius under 20, who had already surpassed the grandmaster level, his achievements weren't even worth mentioning. They walked and talked, neither drawing attention from the other passengers. Is young Master Gu that formidable? The grandson was extremely astonished. His grandfather was a grandmaster, a title synonymous with invincibility, holding a high status even in an era where martial arts were in decline and modern technology reigned supreme. Hearing his grandfather describe the future of the world, the status of powerhouses might only rise further. Yet, his grandfather bowed before that young master. No, Bao didn't even begin to describe his grandfather's attitude toward him. Formidable to the point of being unimaginable. Young Master Gu is destined to achieve great things in the future, at a height I can't even fathom. The old man shook his head, sighing. Otherwise, why do you think I brought you along? If there's a major upheaval in the future, it's entirely possible that someone like young Master Gu might do something groundbreaking. I brought you here so you could make an impression, or at least become a familiar face, in hopes that our family might have a chance to rise later on. The old man's eyes were filled with deep meaning. The grandson obediently acknowledged this. However, you must keep working hard. Young Master Gu values talented individuals with actual strength. If you have no ability, he won't look at you. Don't worry, I will definitely make young Master Gu notice me. The young man was full of drive, patting his chest. The old man looked at his grandson with love and relief. Their bond was deep, but his hands were ruthless. He even apprehended several assassins planning to plant bombs on the ship. Another assassin. Wait, this bloodlust is heavy. While heading toward the bridge, the old man suddenly sensed something, his expression shifting to gravity and shock. A grandmaster's 5 senses are enhanced, allowing them to easily identify the lingering aura on a person. He could even tell how many men a woman had been with. When the aura was chaotic, even an ordinary person might notice, let alone a grandmaster like him. The same went for bloodlust. When a real assassin targeted you, an ordinary person would truly feel a chill, a feeling completely different from the viciousness of a street thug. But the bloodlust he sensed from this person was so intense it was almost suffocating. You go first. The old man spoke solemnly to his grandson. If the newcomer was an enemy, they were undoubtedly a terrifying threat, and he didn't want his grandson, the hope of their future, to die here. The young man immediately prepared to leave. Where are you going? Dao Tianyan stepped out from around the corner, his eyes cold and filled with killing intent as he looked at the pair. After being scolded by Gu Junqing, a wave of resentment surged within him. Unable to strike out at the instigator, Gu Junqing, he had come down to hunt the assassins who were worrying his second sister. If not for these assassins, even if he came into conflict with Gu Junqing, his second sister wouldn't be so biased toward that bastard. With his emotions in turmoil, Dao Tianyan didn't want to hide anymore. As the Azura King, the overlord of the dark forces, he displayed his intimidating aura for the first time. You two are Gu Junqing's men? Sending a grandmaster to clean up these assassins, his approach is quite grand. But your skill is just average, can you really handle this? Dao Tianyan looked at the old man and grandson with contempt. A spark of malice flashed in his heart. He wondered if he should eliminate Gu Junqing's wings here. Surely, losing a grandmaster would make even Gu Junqing's forces feel the pain. Seeing the unfathomable aura around Dao Tianyan, reminiscent of when he first met Gu Junqing, the old man dared not act rashly. And who are you? I think you're the one acting like a street rat. How dare you critique my grandfather and young Master Gu? The grandson couldn't bear to see his grandfather insulted, so he stepped out with an arrogant attitude. Is that so? Seeing the other party unable to hold back his provocation, Dao Tianyan curled his lips into a smile. He didn't want to strike first, fearing Gu Junqing would tell his sisters he was interfering with their mission out of personal vendetta. He might even get scolded by his sisters. But if the other party provoked him first, it would be different. As for the assassins, he would handle them himself, and surely his sisters wouldn't blame him. Shut up. This is a relative of young Master Gu. It is not your place to interrupt. Hearing his grandson's words, the old man's face changed immediately, as he recognized who stood before him. He recalled the private instructions Gu Junqing had given him, so he quickly adopted a disciplinary posture toward his grandson. Relative? Who the fuck is a relative with him? Dao Tianyan's smile stiffened, the curve flattening as his face turned as dark as a coal pot. Is he not? But young Master Gu gave explicit orders that you are his eighth brother, the younger brother of his girlfriend. The more the old man spoke, the darker the other man's face became. A violent aura radiated from his entire body, as if he were about to strike at any moment. This caused the old man's heart, which had endured countless great events, to accelerate, and a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. He didn't dare to be careless, resolving to send his grandson away even if it meant he had to fight. Gu Junqing had personally told many people that anything regarding Dao Tianyan required his prior approval, and no one was to provoke him, something about not feeding him experience points. He also said if the other party provoked him, just repeat what he had just said to Dao Tianyan. He didn't understand it, but he had always trusted Gu Junqing's words implicitly. Yet, why was the other man's face getting darker the more he spoke? The old man could only pray that his words would work. Get the fuck out, Dao Tianyan said coldly, his expression fluctuating between rage and uncertainty. The old man hastily grabbed his grandson, who still looked indignant, and left. Dao Tianyan watched their retreating figures, ultimately deciding not to pursue. It was his sister's influence that pulled back the vengeful, near-maniacal Dao Tianyan. After pondering for a moment, he decided to let the two go. Attacking these two now would certainly weaken Gu Junqing's forces, but for Gu Junqing, it might not be an unbearable loss. As long as Gu Junqing himself lived, no loss was truly unacceptable. But if he attacked, and his second sister hated him for it, that would be the most painful thing for him. And if his sisters grew to despise him, wouldn't he be handing them over to Gu Junqing on a silver platter? Dao Tianyan gasped in shock. He realized why these two provoked him. Talk of brothers-in-law, and eighth brothers didn't sound like begging for mercy at all. Didn't this make him want to kill them even more? Perhaps Gu Junqing intended to use their lives as bait to complain to his sisters. He'd frame him for being short-sighted and acting out of personal vendetta, causing his sisters to reject him. Damn it, Gu Junqing, you are one devious bastard. You'd even set up your own people. Good thing I didn't fall for it. Dao Tianyan felt increasingly certain that, with Gu Junqing's crafty nature, that must have been the plan. If his image before his sisters kept dropping, how would he ever compete for them against Gu Junqing? He actually felt relieved that he had seen through Gu Junqing's scheme. Turning around, he proudly continued to patrol the area, looking for any other short-sighted assassins. Chapter 1175. The old man retreated rapidly with his grandson, keeping a constant watch on their rear. Only after sensing that the subtle, invisible lock on them had vanished did he finally exhale in relief. Grandfather, why were you so polite to that guy? Even though he's young Master Gu's relative, he clearly wasn't respectful to him. We should have taught him a lesson. The young man, still reeling from Dao Tianyan's mockery, spoke with indignation. The old man glanced at his grandson and sighed. I initially wanted to give you a chance to make an impression in front of young Master Gu, but it seems you still need to go out and gain some real experience. Ah, why? The sudden shift in conversation left the young man stunned in place. You ask why? If I hadn't recited the words young Master Gu explicitly instructed me to say, do you think we would still be alive right now? The old man was truly frustrated by his grandson's lack of insight. Having achieved the rank of Grandmaster and serving as a guest of honor for the Xie family, he had built a circle of influence that relied on his protection. This had fostered an arrogant personality in his grandson. The young man knew to fear those with higher status, but when faced with anyone he perceived as having less influence, or dressed worse than him, he acted with a condescending attitude without even using his brain. He completely failed to read the situation. If he provoked someone he shouldn't, like today, and the smaller fish was beaten, then the big fish came out, and the big fish was beaten, would he expect his old grandfather to step up and die for him? This behavior would eventually bring ruin to their family. Was that guy even stronger than you, grandfather? He looked to be about my age. The young man was skeptical. His own strength was roughly at the 4th tier, while his grandfather was a 9th tier grandmaster. How could they both be no match for a kid who looked no older than him? What do you know? That man was a divine level expert. Although he didn't bring the same crushing pressure as young Master Gu, he was a genuine divine level powerhouse. Is that something I can compare to? Ah, grandfather, you're so useless. It's one thing to lose to young Master Gu, but how can you be worse than some unknown nobody? The old man was livid. If the young man weren't his own flesh and blood, he would have struck him down right then and there. Get out of here. Once the cruise ship docks, you are going out to train in the real world. You are not allowed to use the family name. If you go out and deliberately look for trouble, don't expect the family to avenge you if you die out there. After dismissing his grandson, the old man sighed again. He marveled at Gu Junqing's foresight. If not for his instructions, they would have been finished. He then hurried to report the situation to Gu Junqing. Meanwhile, Gu Junqing was still chatting with the 3 women. Naturally, he was probing for information regarding the God of War female lead, Lin Xue. He was extremely interested in this particular heroine, especially now that he knew she was married. Ahem, it wasn't that he had a penchant for other men's wives. Well, not that he didn't. He simply reasoned that since they were married, this God of War must value Lin Xue deeply. Perhaps the story of the God of War, Yang Chen, revolved primarily around her. If he could find a way to conquer this beauty, it would be twice as effective in plundering that God of War's luck. Lin Xue, are you really sure you don't recall any connection to this God of War? If there's no deep bond, why would the God of War's enemies go to such lengths to kill you? And the God of War wouldn't have hired my sister's department to protect you either. Lu Qingyi asked bluntly. She was somewhat unhappy about Lin Xue's presence. Her second sister hadn't exactly been through life and death situations for Lin Xue's sake, but she was certainly in danger now. In her view, why should Lin Xue be the reason her sister was put in harm's way? If Lin Xue were a top scientist capable of changing the nation's landscape like her 6th sister, she wouldn't feel this way. But Lin Xue was just the eldest daughter of an ordinary Lin family. Not to mention the entire Xia kingdom, she wasn't even considered a first-tier family in the capital. In terms of ability, influence, and importance to the nation, she wasn't a vital figure. How could she deserve her sister's personal protection? The assassin organizations involved come from different backgrounds. It could be that the God of War's enemies want to use you as leverage. Some want to kill you to retaliate against him. Others want to kidnap you to threaten him. Regardless, the God of War must have a significant relationship with you. Gu Hanyan added. Unless I have amnesia, I truly don't know that God of War. And my status isn't such that I'd have the opportunity to interact with such people. Lin Xue gave a helpless, bitter smile and shook her head. She didn't take offense at Lu Qingyi's misunderstanding. It wasn't just Lu Qingyi who couldn't grasp it. Even she herself found it difficult to understand. The world Gu Hanyan existed in was beyond her comprehension. She used to think that sayings like there is no peaceful era, only those who bear the burden for you were just empty platitudes. But upon actually experiencing this side of the world, she realized it was far beyond what an ordinary person could touch. After Lin Xue finished speaking, both Lu Qingyi and Gu Hanyan sighed. They too felt that someone of Lin Xue's background shouldn't be caught in such a storm. Yet, this God of War valued Lin Xue so highly, and the God of War's enemies, somehow obtaining this information, believed it enough to spend massive fortunes, sending people to assassinate or capture her. By the way, Lin Xue, you have a husband, don't you? Perhaps it's because of him. Lu Qingyi glanced at Gu Junqing, who was listening intently, and emphasized the word husband. She saw that Gu Junqing was curious about Lin Xue, so she wanted to use this point to curb his thoughts and actions. No matter how lustful Gu Junqing was, surely he wouldn't have designs on a married woman. That's impossible. He went missing 5 years ago, and we didn't have a good relationship anyway. Lin Xue was slightly stunned at the mention, subconsciously glancing at Gu Junqing before hurriedly denying it. Lu Qingyi and Gu Hanyan also caught her subconscious gaze. The two sisters exchanged a knowing look. Could this bastard really hook up with a married woman? It's not necessarily impossible. If he went missing 5 years ago, maybe that God of War is your husband, or perhaps your husband is a key subordinate of his. Exactly. That would explain why those assassins are trying to capture or kill you. Lu Qingyi speculated further. That's also impossible. My betrothed didn't have that kind of ability. How could he have climbed to that position? Recalling the man she was engaged to 5 years ago, Lin Xue denied it immediately. Chapter 1176. Not very capable? Was she too embarrassed to call him trash in front of me? Gu Junqing felt a stir in his heart upon hearing Lin Xue's words. There are several distinct tropes in these God of War novels. Some follow the trash archetype, where the protagonist accidentally offends an enemy, their entire family gets wiped out, and they barely escape with their lives. Despite these tragic circumstances, they always seem to have impossibly good luck. Whether it's stumbling upon supreme cultivation treasures, or meeting a mysterious master to teach them martial arts, they rise suddenly within a few short years to slaughter everyone in their path, eventually returning to the city to exact their revenge, and claim the title of a legendary God of War. Then there's the scumbag archetype, where before becoming a god of war, they rape a woman and then abandon her. In the end, the god of war returns home only to find his 5-year-old daughter living in a dog kennel, prompting him to issue a single command that sends 100,000 soldiers rushing to his aid. However, he could sense a pure aura emanating from Lin Xue, making it clear she was still a virgin. She certainly didn't fit that second category. As for the ability to tell whether a woman is a virgin, some consider it absurd, while others swear by it. In truth, there is actually a scientific basis for it. Women often have a natural body scent they aren't aware of, but the opposite sex can easily detect it. This is typically the scent of female estrogen. When approached by the opposite sex, the influence of male androgens naturally stimulates the production of estrogen in women, which can make their body odor sweeter and more attractive to men. However, the concentration of estrogen produced by a virgin is much higher, making it easier to distinguish. Some people can even judge whether a woman is a virgin just by her posture and demeanor. A person capable of that might not be a total lecher, but they certainly would have had countless encounters. Gu Junqing, however, could tell when a woman had last been intimate just by observing her eyes, a level of mastery that left others in the dust. Since you mentioned him, what kind of person was your husband? And how did you two even meet? Perhaps piqued by Lin Xue's words, Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow and asked with genuine curiosity. In front of a woman he wasn't yet familiar with, our dear Gu always presented himself as a proper, well-mannered gentleman. There would be plenty of time to play the simp once he knew her better. Lin Xue was clearly hesitant, her voice faltering. It's no problem. If it's inconvenient. Gu Junqing paused considerately. No, it's not inconvenient. Lin Xue glanced at Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan and, realizing they seemed curious as well, decided to speak up. Actually, there's no real story between us. 5 years ago, on his deathbed, my grandfather wanted to see me married, so he arranged for me to marry the grandson of an old friend. Although I didn't know him, I couldn't bear to let my grandfather's final wish go unfulfilled, so I agreed. As she said this, her expression dimmed. It was clear she had been very close to her grandfather, who had passed away years ago. It made sense though. If they weren't close, she wouldn't have agreed to such a request. Ji Hanyan and Lu Qingyi, hearing this, felt a newfound respect for Lin Xue. They had grown up without blood relatives, making each other the most important people in their lives. They figured that if one of their sisters were on her deathbed, they would do absolutely anything to fulfill her final wish. I had originally planned to divorce him after fulfilling my grandfather's final wish, and we had even agreed on that. But to my surprise, he disappeared the very first day after we got the marriage certificate. No trace of him dead or alive, and I couldn't get in touch with him at all. Chapter 1177. I originally planned to divorce him after fulfilling my grandfather's final wish, but to my surprise, he disappeared the very first day after we got our marriage certificate. There was no sign of him, dead or alive, and I couldn't reach him at all. The room fell silent as everyone looked at one another. None of them had expected things to turn out this way. They had assumed Lin Xue and her husband had a strained relationship, but they hadn't realized they barely had a connection at all. It was a completely confusing, legally binding marriage. Alarm bells rang in Lu Qingyi's mind. If this was the case, Lin Xue's marriage didn't pose a restriction on her at all. Her situation had instantly shifted from a closed door to an open one. Would Gu Junqing, the fly, really miss a chance to land on this egg? However, she thought about it again. Once they left the cruise ship, given the vast status difference between Lin Xue and Gu Junqing, they likely wouldn't have any further interactions, and she relaxed slightly. As long as she kept a close eye on them while on the ship, she didn't believe they could get together. What happened after that? Ji Hanyan hadn't been thinking that deeply and continued to ask. She didn't know many details about this mission, only that she had to ensure Lin Xue returned to safety. Therefore, she was eager to gather information from Lin Xue. She wanted to see if she could connect the pieces of the puzzle in her head. Do you know about the Yang family in the capital? Lin Xue didn't continue her story, but instead asked a question with a grave expression. Is there a Yang family in the capital? Lu Qingyi looked surprised. Although she was just a superstar in the entertainment industry, countless prominent families tried to invite her to banquets and events. Plus, with the Dark Castle incident involving many families back in the day, she had some knowledge of the top families in the Xia Kingdom. Yet, she had never heard of a Yang family in the capital. Are you talking about the Yang family that was wiped out 5 or 6 years ago? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow. That's right. The Yang family wasn't the absolute top tier, but they were near the front of the pack in the Xia Kingdom, and could be listed among the elite families. However, due to certain reasons, they were destroyed by the Xia family of the capital. My husband was one of the last 2 members of the Yang family. After finishing, Lin Xue lowered her head, as if waiting for a verdict. The Xia family of the capital? Isn't that your family? Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan turned their gazes toward Gu Junqing. Their strange expressions made Gu Junqing feel a bit helpless. I hadn't even arrived in the capital at that time. This has nothing to do with me. Please, continue, don't worry. I wasn't in the capital then, so this doesn't involve me. Gu Junqing finally understood why Lin Xue had been so hesitant earlier. She had been afraid he would blame her for harboring an enemy. Lin Xue looked up, stealing a glance at Gu Junqing's face. Seeing that his expression remained normal, she breathed a sigh of relief and continued. My grandfather and Yang Chen's grandfather were comrades in arms. When the Yang family was wiped out, he rescued Yang Chen to prevent his friend's bloodline from being extinguished, and he made me marry him. Gu Junqing nodded upon hearing this. He hadn't expected to have a connection to the god of war, Yang Chen, and a blood feud of genocide at that. Still, he wasn't too surprised. Even if there was no enmity now, once Yang Chen found out his wife had been stolen, he wouldn't let it go. You mentioned the last two members of the Yang family just now. Besides Yang Chen, who else is there? When Gu Junqing asked this, Lin Xue's expression became conflicted. She was clearly hesitating about whether or not to reveal the other person. He has a younger sister. Chapter 1178. Another sister? A biological one? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow, speaking in a calm tone. Yes, a biological one. When the Yang family was wiped out, only Yang Chen and his sister survived. Later, when Yang Chen went missing, his sister was only a newborn. I couldn't bear to send her to an orphanage at such a young age, so I raised her myself. She was still just a baby then, and has no memory of it. I've never taught her hatred, nor have I told her about the past, so please, can you spare her? Lin Xue's voice was low and trembling, as if gripped by fear. She stood up from her chair, walked over to Gu Junqing, and suddenly sank to her knees, pleading with him. In the dim light, her figure appeared frail and helpless. Her voice, thin as a thread in the wind, trembled with desperate, earnest entreaty. Although her relationship with the child was nominally that of a sister-in-law, their years together had made Lin Xue treat her as if she were her own. That was why she couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have even considered hiding this secret. Yet, knowing how easy it would be for someone like Gu Junqing to find out, she dared not conceal the child's existence. Lu Qingyi and Ji Hanyan couldn't help but feel moved by her words. Having grown up in an orphanage themselves, they knew all too well that without the companionship of their sisters, those days would have been far harder than those spent under the care of loving parents. Seeing Lin Xue's refusal to abandon the child to an orphanage, they developed a newfound respect for her. However, this matter didn't concern them. Naturally, they wouldn't intercede with Gu Junqing on behalf of Lin Xue and a child they had never met. The two women simply sat quietly, watching how Gu Junqing would handle the situation. Whether he decided to cut the weeds and dig up the roots, or let this last survivor be, they didn't really care. Gu Junqing didn't answer immediately, sitting silently with his hands folded across his chest and his brow furrowed. Under the soft light, his profile looked sharp and deep, like a masterfully sculpted work of art. Every subtle movement, his knitted brow, his shifting gaze, his crossed hands, suggested he was deep in thought, as if weighing his choices carefully. In reality, he was feeling quite bored. Naturally, he had no intention of simply eliminating the protagonist's sister just like that. This was clearly a golden opportunity to strike at the god of war protagonist. However, he would need to meet her in person first. Of course, despite having his own agenda, he couldn't show it on the surface. At the very least, he had to put on a show of being in a difficult position. Only then would the female lead, Lin Xue, be truly grateful to him. Lin Xue dared only to watch the thoughtful Gu Junqing silently, afraid that any movement might interrupt him or influence his judgment. She knew that such powerful families rarely acted without purpose, but when they did, they ensured every detail was accounted for. How could they fail to root out the competition completely? But she had no choice but to gamble on what kind of person Gu Junqing really was. Sigh, this is actually quite difficult to handle. I wasn't even in the capital when all of this happened. Besides, no matter what, I am still just a grandson. While I have some sway, I cannot simply make decisions like this on my own. Seeing Lin Xue's gaze grow increasingly fragile and pleading, Gu Junqing judged that the time was right. He let out a sigh, feigning the look of someone stuck in a predicament. Was it really that difficult? It was just a matter of saying one word. But he, Gu, was no philanthropist. If he didn't exploit such a situation, wouldn't that be a disservice to his role as a villain? Chapter 1179. Gu Junqing's hesitation seemed to give Lin Xue hope. She feared nothing more than him condemning the child to death without a second thought. Just try your best. If it's truly impossible, then that's just the child's fate. Lin Xue looked at Gu Junqing, her eyes shining with gratitude, like the brightest stars in a sparkling night sky. Gu Junqing coughed lightly, feeling a flicker of guilt. How about this? Once we return to the capital, I will meet the child myself. If things are truly as you say, our Xie family won't pursue this. Judging by his tone, he wouldn't hold the Lin family accountable for hiding the orphan of the Yang family either. This deepened Lin Xue's gratitude toward him even further. Ding, heroine Lin Xue's favorability towards the host has increased by 5, now at 35, gradually improving. It'll be fine. She is very obedient and well-behaved. You will surely like her once you meet her. Lin Xue said with great confidence. Is that so? What is the child's name? Gu Junqing asked with keen interest. Ah, I forgot to tell you. Lin Xue patted her head in frustration. Her name is Lin Yi. She took my surname. Lin Yi, a lovely name. How old is she? Gu Junqing seamlessly pivoted the conversation to Lin Yi, chatting naturally with Lin Xue about everything from her daily life to schooling. It felt as if their relationship had drawn much closer. Beside them, Ji Hanyan and Lu Qingyi felt like the two in front of them were a married couple discussing their child's future. They felt like complete outsiders. This bastard is so attentive to someone else's kid. Is he actually trying to step up as a stepfather? Ugh, I guess not exactly, Lu Qingyi muttered to her sister. Don't be silly. Is he really paying attention to the child? Ji Hanyan pursed her lips. Look at Lin Xue's attitude toward Gu Junqing now. it had already shifted significantly from her initial awe. It hadn't been long, and she dared not imagine what it would be like in a few more days. Ha, true. Even with us sisters around, he's still such a flirt. Though, if we gave him a few more kids, do you think we could wear him out? Lu Qingyi started off indignant, but after a moment, she rolled her eyes and suggested this to her second sister. Ji Hanyan gave her third sister a complicated look and shook her head. They say a woman in love loses IQ. But was this a bit too much? Was she torturing him, or just making him happy? Gu Junqing caught Lu Qingyi's murmuring and nearly burst out laughing, the corner of his lips curving slightly. Lin Xue stared at him, stunned. She assumed he was smiling because he was happy chatting about Lin Yi. Lin Xue felt a flutter in her heart, secretly pleased, feeling that Lin Yi's life might truly be saved. Stop, stop, stop. We are supposed to be discussing why Lin Xue is being hunted, not chatting about children. Can we focus on the task at hand? Seeing them still chatting, Lu Qingyi pulled a stern face and spoke with visible annoyance. Lin Xue had no choice but to stop talking about how cute Lin Yi was. So why do you insist that your missing husband isn't the reason you're being hunted? Are you perhaps holding back information? Lu Qingyi asked, clearly dissatisfied. Her sister had saved Lin Xue several times now. Not only was there no gratitude, but Lin Xue was also casting longing glances at their man without a shred of shame. We saved you, yet you want to steal our man. Lu Qingyi didn't have a bad temper. Her leniency toward her staff was proof of that. But right now, she couldn't help but lose patience with Lin Xue. Chapter 1180. Lin Xue clearly perceived Lu Qingyi's attitude. From the beginning, she had harbored a subtle, underlying hostility toward her, which Lin Xue initially struggled to understand as she wanted to avoid any conflict. After all, she was actually a fan of Lu Qingyi. She wasn't exactly a fanatic, but she truly enjoyed listening to her music. When the three women spoke privately earlier, Lu Qingyi hadn't targeted her, and they had gotten along quite well. However, she noticed that whenever Gu Junqing was present, Lu Qingyi's attitude toward her soured. Lin Xue was a sharp and intelligent person. By this point, she understood perfectly well why Lu Qingyi's demeanor shifted. She was worried that she and Gu Junqing might develop romantic feelings for one another. This realization left Lin Xue feeling both amused and helpless. At most, her feelings for Gu Junqing were a reaction to his appearance. While she was somewhat mesmerized by his otherworldly, handsome features, it only amounted to a passing attraction. She wanted to explain herself, but she was stuck in a bind because such things were impossible to articulate. She couldn't very well tell Lu Qingyi, to her face and in front of Gu Junqing, that she didn't like him. Furthermore, she wasn't entirely sure her own heart didn't harbor a shred of desire for him. Outstanding and beautiful women attract countless men, and by the same token, a handsome, wealthy man is irresistible to all women. If that man also maintained a charming demeanor and possessed excellent upbringing, then he was truly invincible. However, she would not harbor any illusions. Even though she had never consummated her marriage with Yang Chen, she was technically a divorced woman. How could she possibly be worthy of a man like Gu Junqing? She saw how even the superstar Lu Qingyi was so taken with him. Then there was Ji Hanyan. With her staggering combat prowess, the two were even sisters. Even if she didn't need Ji Hanyan's protection right now, she knew she couldn't compete with women of their caliber. Very quickly, Lin Xue clarified her own standing in the situation. She naturally kept her profile low. It's because Yang Chen's capabilities were so pitifully low. When he was part of the Yang family, he was a direct descendant, but he was so incompetent that he had almost no presence at all, which is why he managed to escape the Xia family's punishment. That is why I don't think he could have any connection to that so-called god of war. Lin Xue gave a bitter smile, detailing everything she knew without leaving anything out. In truth, she didn't know the inside story regarding why the Xia family had wiped out the Yang family in the first place. But they were all shrewd enough not to stop her from framing it as the Yang family's own fault in front of Gu Junqing. I see. In that case, it is highly unlikely. Lu Qingyi nodded thoughtfully. Being a direct descendant of a family, yet being so useless that a family with the intent of genocide ignored you, really meant he had to be incompetent to an unimaginable degree. Gu Junqing, however, felt a spark of understanding flicker in his eyes. Before encountering their fated opportunities, these god of war protagonists were usually pathetic figures. If not, they wouldn't carry such titles and reputations, nor would they be addressed as trash or useless sons-in-law even after their status and aura had clearly undergone a total transformation. Is there anything else you wish to add? Lu Qingyi continued to press. Lin Xue did not get angry at Lu Qingyi's interrogative, police-like attitude. She understood what kind of trouble her presence would bring to the people before her. Therefore, she remained extremely cooperative from start to finish. No, nothing else. Lin Xue shook her head. Lu Qingyi wanted to say something more, but Ji Hanyan raised a hand to interrupt her. After a slight shake of her head, Lu Qingyi finally let it go. Chapter 1181. Seeing that Lu Qingyi had finally calmed down, Ji Hanyan let out a sigh of relief. She understood exactly what her sister was thinking, but there wasn't much she could do about it. It was hard not to blame Gu Junqing, a man who attracted women more effortlessly than anyone she had ever met. She shot him a sharp, frustrated glare. Why is the squabbling between you women being blamed on me? And what are you fighting over, anyway? My little brother is invincible, you'd be better off attacking together. Gu Junqing muttered inwardly, arching an eyebrow. After glaring at Gu Junqing, Ji Hanyan turned back to Lin Xue. Since we can't pinpoint the reason, let's leave it be for now. The most important thing is to ensure your safety, so you'd best not leave my side for the next few days. She hesitated for a moment, then pointed at Gu Junqing. If something comes up, you can look for him as well. Isn't second sister just inviting the wolf into the house? Lu Qingyi felt a wave of displeasure, but she couldn't bring herself to contradict her sister's decision. As long as she was around, she wouldn't let Gu Junqing and Lin Xue hook up behind their backs. Lin Xue was slightly stunned, then hurried to thank Gu Junqing, apologizing for the trouble. Gu Junqing waved it off, signaling that it was no problem. Just then, Gu Junqing felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He took it out, read the message, and his eyes grew dark and deep. What happened? Ji Hanyan asked quickly, noticing his sour expression. She suspected something had gone wrong with the business of clearing out the assassins. It's nothing, just a minor conflict between my men and Dao Tianyan. It's already resolved, Gu Junqing sighed, feigning a look of helplessness. What? How could he be so unreasonable? Ji Hanyan was shocked, then furious. Her chest rose and fell with agitation. She never expected Dao Tianyan to be so reckless about the bigger picture. She had been relieved that Dao Tianyan offered to help, but now a fire of anger was burning in her heart. She didn't doubt the truth of Gu Junqing's words for a second. She understood her brother Dao Tianyan well enough to know he was capable of this. Besides, Gu Junqing wasn't foolish enough to fabricate news that could be verified with a simple question. No, I'm going down to find him, Ji Hanyan said coldly. Her indescribably beautiful eyes, which usually held the clarity of clear waters, now shimmered with cold intensity. She wouldn't gamble with the lives of thousands of passengers on this cruise. It's all right. He hates me to the bone, so the fact that he didn't attack this time shows he still cares about the bigger picture. Second sister, you're injured. You need to rest first. The way here wasn't easy for you. Gu Junqing didn't kick her while she was down. Instead, he offered a word of comfort. He knew Dao Tianyan held a significant place in his sisters' hearts, a bond from their childhood that could never be erased. Put simply, it was a sibling bond, but in reality, it was no different from childhood sweethearts. Even if Dao Tianyan had been impulsive this time, he hadn't attacked or harmed anyone, so it wasn't a major offense. Moreover, he had already sensed that something was off with Ji Hanyan. A faint scent of blood lingered on her. It was extremely slight, but how could Gu Junqing fail to smell it? He guessed she was injured and had used her internal energy to forcefully seal the wound. Now that she had reached a safe place, her guard had finally lowered. What? Second sister, you're injured? Lu Qingyi was horrified upon hearing this. They had been chatting for so long, yet she hadn't noticed a thing. Even Lin Xue, the person at the center of it all, couldn't help but look at Ji Hanyan, her eyes filled with guilt and worry. Chapter 1182. Lu Qingyi didn't hesitate, stepping forward to pull back Ji Hanyan's clothes to check her injuries. I'm fine, really. It's just a minor scratch, so don't worry. Ji Hanyan felt helpless and quickly stopped her. She didn't mind being checked, but she certainly didn't want it done in front of so many people. Only after confirming several times that Ji Hanyan had no serious injuries did Lu Qingyi finally relax. Second sister, please don't hold back next time you're hurt, she reproached with a hint of concern. Do you have any idea how worried I was? Knowing Ji Hanyan was hurt had nearly scared her to death. But having spent so many years together as sisters, she knew exactly what kind of character her second sister possessed. To Ji Hanyan, nothing mattered more than the responsibilities she shouldered. She would always prioritize getting things organized before she ever spared a thought for herself. Leave everything else to me now. Just get some rest, second sister, and I'll handle the rest. Gu Junqing stepped forward, looking into Ji Hanyan's eyes with extreme seriousness. Ji Hanyan was slightly stunned, as it was the first time she had seen Gu Junqing make such a solemn promise to her. I believe you. She nodded, feeling satisfied and comforted. Then, Miss Lin, why don't you stay in my room tonight? That way I can provide close protection, and you can rest easy knowing you're safe. I'm actually stronger than second sister here. Gu Junqing turned with a mischievous smile. The smile that had just begun to lift on Ji Hanyan's face instantly froze, and her complexion darkened significantly. She knew she couldn't trust this bastard. She must have been insane to even consider letting these two share a space. Close protection? She was afraid they would be engaged in zero-distance protection before they even docked. I'm afraid the only thing you'd be guarding against isn't assassins, but you, young Master Gu. Lu Qingyi looked at him with hostile eyes. Piffed. Seeing the two sisters teaming up against Gu Junqing, Lin Xue couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her nerves, which had been tight for so long, finally began to loosen. As Lin Xue laughed, everyone turned their surprised gazes toward her. Lin Xue blushed, seeing them staring. What's wrong? What are you laughing at? Lu Qingyi asked curiously. Did she really want Gu Junqing to be her personal bodyguard? Was she trying to cheat on her missing husband already? Wasn't young Master Gu just making a joke? Lin Xue still found Gu Junqing's words quite funny, and she remained smiling as she spoke. She truly believed Gu Junqing was only joking about staying with her to provide protection. Exactly, I was just making a joke. Are you two thinking too filthily? Gu Junqing accidentally blurted out his inner thoughts, but after seeing Lin Xue dismiss it as a joke, he quickly recovered with a straight face. Both sisters sneered in unison. Unlike Lin Xue, they had spent enough time with Gu Junqing to know his true colors. That comment didn't sound like a joke to them at all. It seemed this guy really had developed designs on this married beauty. They really needed to keep a close watch on Gu Junqing. They had to ensure they didn't end up with another sister once they got off the cruise ship. After exchanging a few meaningful glances, the sisters reached a silent agreement. Second sister should stay with Lin Xue. As for you, I'm staying with you. Chapter 1183. The room, currently assigned to Lu Qingyi, was quite spacious, more than enough to comfortably accommodate 3 women. Furthermore, Ji Hanyan was injured. Although the wound wasn't critical, it would certainly hinder her if she were forced to fight. Under these circumstances, Lu Qingyi was choosing to leave them behind and stay with him instead. Gu Junqing was slightly surprised, but he felt rather pleased. He knew Lu Qingyi was guarding against him interacting with other women, especially beautiful ones. It was a completely unintended move that had yielded an unexpected bonus. He finally understood the sisters' strategy. One would watch him, and the other would watch Lin Xue. It was a perfect way to prevent the two of them from getting together in private. Still, wasn't this a bit too much precaution? Was he, Gu, really the type of man who would commit such offenses right in front of them? Lu Qingyi, however, felt indifferent. Aside from taking that final step, she and Gu Junqing had already done everything else that could be done, and even some things that couldn't. She didn't believe she could ever accept another man after him. Because of this, she felt no resistance at all to the idea of sharing a room with Gu Junqing. In the past, she wouldn't have even considered sharing a room with a man. She would have felt a deep-seated revulsion at even a polite handshake with a male. I don't think it's a good idea for second sister to keep guarding her. After all, the assassins are targeting Miss Lin, and second sister is injured. If an assassin slips in and she can't stop them, that would be a disaster. Why don't I take over the protection? Second sister, you know my capabilities. You don't need to worry about Miss Lin's safety at all. I can guarantee that I would rather be injured myself than let Miss Lin come to any harm. Even as he felt pleased, Gu Junqing kept a look of deep concern on his face as he argued his point. Lin Xue, not yet familiar with Gu Junqing's true personality, assumed he was genuinely worried about her. She felt flattered and surprised. She was well aware of Gu Junqing's high status, someone who stood at the absolute pinnacle, even in the capital, and the entire Xia kingdom. Yet, he was willing to personally take on the task of her protection. Lin Xue felt her heart, which had never been stirred by a man before, beating significantly faster. He was handsome, gentle, and had a top-tier family background. It would be difficult to find such a man anywhere in the entire Xia kingdom. If she could be with a man like this. She peeked up at Gu Junqing's earnest expression, her cheeks flushing crimson. When he glanced her way, she hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to meet his eyes. Hey, let you protect her? You'd have her in bed before the night was out, Ji Hanyan thought, watching Lin Xue's reaction with a complex expression and a mental sigh. Lin Xue still had a husband. Although she claimed there were no feelings between them, the legal status remained. Moreover, it was a match arranged by the grandfather she had been so close to. That missing husband surely held a place in Lin Xue's heart. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken the risk of being implicated just to hide the fact that Yang Chen was still alive. Back then, the conflict between the Xie and Yang families had been notorious, and all members of the Yang family had been wanted fugitives. Even for the sake of her grandfather, it was unlikely she would betray that marriage. That would explain why she hadn't sought out another man in 5 years. And yet, even under these circumstances, Gu Junqing had managed to stir her heart. How could she and Lu Qingyi possibly feel safe leaving the two of them alone in a room together? Chapter 1184. In your dreams. Lu Qingyi looked at Gu Junqing with contempt as he insisted on protecting Lin Xue personally. Enough. Come on, get inside. We can talk about this tomorrow. There's no need to worry about anyone coming here with your people patrolling the area. They had just learned from Gu Junqing that he had Grandmaster-level martial artists stationed on the cruise ship. There were very few assassins in the entire underworld who had reached the Grandmaster realm or higher. They didn't think all of those Grandmaster-level assassins would be on this cruise ship anyway. Consequently, they felt much more at ease. Besides, although Ji Hanyan had sustained some external injuries, she was still perfectly capable of fighting if necessary. If an assassin truly managed to get past Gu Junqing's Grandmaster subordinates, then her staying here wouldn't make any difference. In fact, it might even hinder Ji Hanyan's ability to fight. Because of this, Lu Qingyi had no intention of remaining in that room. Good night, Miss Linear. Gu Junqing walked over to Lin Xue, gently took her white, delicate hand, and pressed a light kiss to the back of it with impeccable etiquette. Ji, good night. Lin Xue was caught completely off guard, and she could almost feel the phantom outline of his lips against her skin. She wasn't some naive 17 or 18-year-old girl, but this was the first time she had ever experienced her heart pounding like a drum. She hadn't even felt this excited when her grandfather had told her she was to marry Yang Chen. Her pretty face flushed crimson, and she lowered her head, nervously tugging at her clothes in a shy, tender, and pitiable way that was difficult to describe. Ding, the host has stirred the heart of the heroine, Lin Xue. Reward 4,000 villain points. Lu Qingyi, feeling anger flare up in her heart, quickly pushed Gu Junqing out the door. The room suddenly became much quieter, leaving only the dazed Lin Xue and the composed Ji Hanyan. Ji Hanyan's possessiveness was not as strong as Lu Qingyi's. Seeing Lin Xue's expression now, she only let out a soft sigh. She knew this was entirely Gu Junqing's doing, playing the flirt. She couldn't blame Lin Xue. Get some rest. Don't worry too much about tonight. Ji Hanyan patted Lin Xue's shoulder, snapping her out of her stupor, and spoke in a calm tone. Lin Xue knew that she and Gu Junqing lived in completely different worlds. Yet, she couldn't help the uncontrollable urge to learn more about him. Neither woman undressed, simply lying down on the bed as they were. After hesitating for a long time, Lin Xue couldn't help but whisper, Sister Ji, could you tell me about young Master Gu? He is not a good person. If you don't want to lose yourself, it is best not to get any closer to him. Ji Hanyan's eyes were slightly closed as she meditated, and upon hearing the question, she could only sigh inwardly before offering a slow, cautionary piece of advice. Lose myself. Lin Xue was puzzled. While the four of them were talking earlier, she had been keenly aware of the atmosphere lingering between them. She also knew that the relationship between Gu Junqing and the two sisters, Ji Hanyan and Lu Qingyi, was definitely not simple. From the way Lu Qingyi had naturally chosen to stay with Gu Junqing, she vaguely guessed that it probably wasn't the first time they had slept together. She knew that love could make people lose themselves, but could that really happen to beauties as stunning and elegant as Ji Hanyan and Lu Qingyi? Yes. If you truly fall in love with him, you might no longer be the person you once were. As Ji Hanyan's final sentence faded into the room like a whisper, silence descended, and not another sound was heard. Lin Xue didn't fully understand what Ji Hanyan meant, but she could grasp some of the complex emotions behind the words, causing her heart to fall into deep, troubled contemplation. Chapter 1185. Gu Junqing was pulled by Lu Qingyi into his room. Why the rush? I'm not in any hurry, Gu Junqing said helplessly as they entered. Rush your head, she snapped back. Lu Qingyi glared at him with her beautiful eyes, then extended the back of her hand toward him. She stood there, waiting expectantly for him to act. What are you doing? Gu Junqing blinked, looking genuinely confused. Kiss it, she commanded impatiently. Why? You never kissed my hand when we first met, yet you just kissed Lin Xue's. Lu Qingyi glared at him, pouting with frustration. You're not married, why would I kiss your hand? Besides, if I had dared to get that close to you back then, I'm afraid you would have fought me to the death. Gu Junqing couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. A kiss on the hand is usually reserved for elder or married women, but it is generally inappropriate for single women unless they hold significant status. While Lin Xue hadn't had any real intimate contact with Yang Chen, she was technically married. Her status could not be equated to that of a single woman. Ha! I don't see you kissing anyone else on a normal day. I think you just thought Lin Xue was pretty and wanted to flirt with her. Lu Qingyi scoffed, her voice icy. She wasn't ignorant of social etiquette, but she simply couldn't stand seeing Gu Junqing acting affectionately with other women. She saw right through me, Gu Junqing muttered to himself. Fine, fine. I'll kiss it, okay. Gu Junqing shook his head with a dramatic sigh. Humph. Lu Qingyi scoffed with a pout. She felt quite satisfied watching Gu Junqing slowly lower his head to kiss the back of her hand. To her, it felt as though she were using her own skin to cleanse the spot he had just kissed on Lin Xue. In her mind, this made Gu Junqing clean again. However, Lu Qingyi suddenly felt something was off. She sensed a wet, tingling sensation on the back of her hand. She looked down and discovered, to her horror, that Gu Junqing was actually licking her hand. Ah, Gu Junqing, why are you licking me? Are you crazy? Lu Qingyi screamed and jerked her hand away. Looking at the wet spot on her hand, she marched forward indignantly, intent on attacking him. Isn't that what you told me to do? Gu Junqing laughed, dodging her swipes as they began to chase each other around the room. I told you to kiss, not lick. Are you disgusting, or what? Lu Qingyi's face turned bright red, and she continued to chase him, unable to suppress her frustration. You haven't seen the disgusting things I'm capable of yet, Gu Junqing muttered to himself. Still, playing around with Lu Qingyi in private was quite entertaining. He had no intention of letting her catch him so easily. Stop right there. The room wasn't large, but Gu Junqing was far too agile. No matter how hard Lu Qingyi tried, she couldn't catch him, and they ended up circling the table. Suddenly, Lu Qingyi's eyes darted as she had an idea. She sprang forward like a hungry tiger, leaping over the small table in an attempt to tackle him onto the sofa. Fearing she might injure herself, Gu Junqing caught her body, but her momentum sent him tumbling backward onto the sofa with her on top of him. Humph. Let's see you try to run now. Lu Qingyi straightened up, looking down at Gu Junqing with a triumphant smirk. Chapter 1186. Lu Qingyi had pinned Gu Junqing to the sofa. Sitting atop him, she straightened her back, looking down at him with a triumphant air. Run. Let's see who's going to be running in a moment. The corners of Gu Junqing's mouth curled into an amused smile, as if he were watching a show. Lu Qingyi felt something stirring beneath her. Even through 2 layers of clothing, it felt like it was going to burn her, and the smile on her face instantly froze. Feeling her body stiffen to the point where she didn't even dare to move, Gu Junqing found the situation rather amusing. It wasn't their first time together. Why was she acting like a young, inexperienced girl? Gu Junqing didn't move. He simply watched her pretty face, which had turned flushed and soft. Seeming shy under his gaze, Lu Qingyi didn't dare to meet his eyes. She cleared her throat and turned her head away, though she made no move to get up. Gu Junqing gazed at her slender, snow-white neck and the stray strands of hair that had come loose from behind her ear during their play. Even with his level of self-control, his heartstrings were being pulled. Realizing that while she was shy, she had no intention of retreating, he understood her attitude perfectly. If he were to sweep her up and toss her onto the bed right now, things would likely proceed with a bit of reluctant consent. However, he didn't want to do that just yet. He wanted Lu Qingyi to be the one to finally break that final barrier. Seconds ticked by. Gu Junqing and Lu Qingyi just sat there, neither of them speaking to break the tension. Lu Qingyi had been waiting for Gu Junqing to lose control, so she could go along with it. But after waiting for so long, the man hadn't made a single move, which left her feeling annoyed. She certainly didn't doubt her own allure. After all, he was clearly still very much interested. But the fact that Gu Junqing just kept looking at her with an amused expression irritated her. Usually, he would be begging for attention, but now that she had practically served herself up, he wouldn't take the lead. Did she really have to be the one to ask? Annoyed, Lu Qingyi glared at him. She was angry and frustrated, yet still shy. She gritted her teeth, looking as though she might bite him at any moment. Their dynamic had been quite intense, but even the most heated atmosphere couldn't withstand prolonged silence. Lu Qingyi finally lost her patience and snapped, "Gu Junqing, what is the meaning of this? How long has it even been, and you've already lost interest in me? How long have you known Lin Xue, and you're already obsessed with her, and have no interest in me anymore?" She felt deeply wronged. Usually, Gu Junqing might not be impatient, but he certainly never missed a chance to be intimate with her. Yet today, she had taken the initiative to this extent, and he remained completely indifferent. This left her feeling frustrated and slighted, and she began to wonder if Gu Junqing truly didn't like her anymore. "Because I want you to think it through for yourself, third sister. I know your emotions are conflicted, and I don't want you to make a choice out of a moment of impulse." Gu Junqing said this, sounding incredibly sincere. He played the part of the gentleman, acting as though he would never let her feel slighted. He had noticed that Lu Qingyi's mood had been off all night, likely because she was still jealous of Lin Xue. Of course, he was certain that Lu Qingyi wasn't going anywhere tonight, which was why he was so confident in letting her think things through. If she had tried to run away immediately, it would be a different story whether he could maintain this gentlemanly facade. Chapter 1187. The sea breeze whistled outside, and the waves rhythmically lapped against the hull of the cruise ship, causing it to rock gently. Outside, the world was pitch black, but inside, the ship was brilliantly lit and filled with the noise of celebration. Sea breeze blew into the room, bringing with it a hint of salty, humid air. Lu Qingyi could almost feel the chill it carried. Yet, it was nothing compared to the coldness in her heart at this moment. "What do you mean by that? Do you think I'm only thinking about sleeping with you right now because I'm jealous of Lin Xue?" Lu Qingyi was stunned for a moment when she heard Gu Junqing's words, but she quickly flew into a rage. She couldn't believe Gu Junqing actually thought she had only agreed because she was jealous of Lin Xue. "Gu Junqing, where do you get the nerve to think so highly of yourself?" Lu Qingyi yelled, her anger mounting with every word. Since her debut, Lu Qingyi had risen to become a pop diva. She had experienced everything from contract disputes and malicious rumors to manipulated photos. Yet, nothing had ever made her this angry. She felt as if she were being looked down upon by Gu Junqing. Although she took issue with his flirtations with Lin Xue, she would never give herself to him just because of that. "Isn't it?" Gu Junqing looked slightly taken aback. Lu Qingyi gave him a deep look. They stood facing each other in silence, the intensity of their previous argument seemingly fading. Yet, they could both vaguely feel that the air in the room was like hot oil. If a single drop of water were to fall, it would explode. Lu Qingyi's tone seemed to calm down. "Gu Junqing, do you realize how disrespectful you are? You seem to like forcing things on others. Whether you're being subtle or aggressive, you're always determined to get your way." Looking at the man before her, whose eyes were gradually growing deeper, she couldn't help but want to speak her mind. "Can anyone truly reach your heart like this?" Lu Qingyi stepped forward and pressed her hand against Gu Junqing's chest, murmuring to herself. Gu Junqing was momentarily speechless. He had only wanted to ensure Lu Qingyi wouldn't regret her decision, and wanted her to be certain of her own mind. He hadn't expected to provoke her this deeply. He hadn't anticipated that she would pour out everything she usually kept hidden. This heroine's thoughts were far more intricate than he had imagined, and she possessed insight and spirit far beyond other women. She was sensitive, intuitive, observant, and emotionally nuanced, with unique perspectives on people and events. If it weren't for this personality, she might never have written so many stunning songs. Furthermore, she wouldn't have been so deeply affected by external circumstances. 10 years of time hadn't been enough to heal her scarred heart, which had witnessed the tragic lives of so many women. Not only had Lu Qingyi failed to see him clearly, but perhaps he had never truly seen through her either. "I don't care if you're a good person or a bad one, and I don't care what you're trying to do. Even if you have a maturity that transcends your peers, and even if you carry the weight of a family's rise and fall, I don't like it when you calculate every single thing you do, constantly weighing the pros and cons. If you really don't want us to happen, then I can wait." Lu Qingyi let out everything that had been weighing on her heart in one breath. She had been in the industry for years and had seen plenty of ugly faces in the entertainment world, but she had rarely encountered someone as complex as Gu Junqing. Chapter 1188. For most of the time since Lu Qingyi returned to the capital, she had followed her second sister Ji Hanyan's instructions and remained almost inseparable from Gu Junqing. At first, she had no good feelings toward him. In fact, she had quite a few complaints. Handsome, possessing a good family background, hypocritical, and a sweet talker. Every single point aligned perfectly with the definition of a scumbag. She had assumed he was just a womanizing playboy and a dissolute scion. Naturally, when she found out her second sister had started seeing him, she was extremely guarded against him. But as they spent time together, she gradually stopped thinking that way. This guy wasn't like ordinary rich brats. He was clever, far cleverer than she had imagined. It seemed as though he had everything under control, and she rarely saw him looking confused or lost about anything. Furthermore, there was almost nothing he couldn't do. Languages, calculation, IT, sports, martial arts, academics, Anything useful in life, he had mastered to an astonishing degree. Achievements that might take a person a lifetime of effort to attain in any single field were things he had mastered. Yet, Gu Junqing was only in his early 20s, and he had already reached the pinnacle in every single area. How could one not feel admiration and amazement at this? At first, Lu Qingyi hadn't believed that Gu Junqing could reach the peak in every field, but after they privately compared singing skills one time, she was silenced. It was the first time she had suffered a defeat in the area she was most confident in. Only then did she truly understand why her second sister was so drawn to Gu Junqing. What he relied on wasn't just good looks or sweet words. It was, even more so, his own capability and strength. This level of ability was not something that a so-called family could bestow upon him. She knew deeply that even if Gu Junqing had nothing now, relying solely on his abilities, it would be easy for him to forge another brilliantly flourishing family from scratch. The label of dissolute scion was nothing more than a joke. His martial prowess had reached an unfathomable level. She even felt it wouldn't be much weaker than that of her eldest sister, who was obsessed with martial arts. Only those who knew Gu Junqing well understood just how terrifying his talent and capabilities were. Yet, despite Gu Junqing's heaven-defying abilities, she had a nagging intuition that he did everything with a sense of urgency, as if something were chasing him from behind. Gu Junqing seemed perfect in every aspect, with outstanding abilities and an outstanding family background. She couldn't fathom what could possibly threaten his position. She didn't want to know why Gu Junqing was this way, but regardless of his reasons, she wanted to soothe his soul. Perhaps he was incredibly capable and seasoned in his behavior, but in the end, he was only a 20-year-old man. Especially tonight, after he finished chatting with Lin Xue, she had easily noticed fluctuations in the man's emotions. Even though he hid it well, not even his gaze, movements, or breathing frequency changed. With her keen observation skills and intuition, she could faintly sense the subtle ripples within Gu Junqing's heart. He was likely thinking about plotting against someone again, and that person was undoubtedly related to Lin Xue. This was why she had developed a faint hostility toward Lin Xue, a hostility that even her second sister had misinterpreted as jealousy. Yet, only Lu Qingyi herself knew the true reason for her actions. Perhaps even Gu Junqing himself hadn't realized just how absurdly terrifying the woman before him was, given her intuitive capabilities. Chapter 1189. If you really don't want us to happen, then I can wait. Gu Junqing fell silent after hearing Lu Qingyi's long confession. He had assumed she was simply competing with Lin Xue, never expecting she just wanted to understand his true thoughts. Suddenly, Gu Junqing felt the pretense was meaningless. Given their relationship, there was no need to act anymore. According to her, she just wanted him to open up to her. There was truly nothing they couldn't share. I was wrong. Gu Junqing dropped his playful attitude, offering a sincere apology that was nearly a bow. He never expected to be scolded for being too gentle. Perhaps with a heroine as sensitive as Lu Qingyi, it was best to simply follow one's heart. Are you going to continue, or not? Lu Qingyi took a deep breath, fighting the tremor in her voice. She ached for the hidden pressures Gu Junqing carried, though she knew she couldn't help him. She knew he wanted her, and if her body could ease his burden, she was willing. Yet, she felt too embarrassed to say this aloud. She worried he might think she was a loose woman. Of course, Gu Junqing didn't want to ask if she was sure. That would just be fucking stupid. It would be like a girl inviting you up for a drink, and you actually just drink the water. Or if she untied her dress straps, and you used them to jump rope. You deserve to be cheated on. With his confirmation, Lu Qingyi felt a mix of melancholy and complexity. Ever since they had bared their hearts, an awkward atmosphere seemed to permeate the air. Not knowing how to break the tension, she quickly said, I'll take a shower first, then you can go. Gu Junqing rubbed his chin with a wicked smirk. Why don't we go together? Get lost. In your dreams. Lu Qingyi rolled her eyes instinctively, snapped at him, and turned into the bathroom. It successfully broke the tension, returning them to their usual dynamic. Once inside, Lu Qingyi stood still and sighed softly. Although she was mentally prepared, the actual moment of giving herself away still felt melancholic. After a moment of daze, she turned on the faucet and slowly stripped off her clothes. As each piece fell away, a glistening, porcelain-like body, as smooth as a peeled egg, was revealed. Her skin was exceptionally fair, soft, and smooth as a newborn's. A light touch would leave a pink mark on her delicate skin, revealing just how silky it was. Her scorching, sexy figure went without saying, a golden ratio at 1.7 meters tall, with a petite yet exquisite frame. Her curves were perfectly accentuated, with a waist that was slender and supple. She was a top-tier beauty, with a hidden allure in her gaze, a true masterpiece of a woman. Humming a soft tune with her lush, red lips, she stepped into the filled bathtub with her delicate legs and alluring, porcelain feet. As she submerged her provocative body into the warm water, her lips parted with a soft, comfortable moan. That bastard only knows how to bully me. Even this requires me to take the initiative. He usually acts like a sex-crazed maniac, who wants to devour people whole. Yet at the critical moment, he claims he wants to care for my feelings. He's such a fake. Big jerk, big pervert. She muttered, cursing him as she washed herself. Ahem, third sister, that's enough. I can hear you cursing me from out here. With a pop, as if a power switch had been flipped, the glass beside Lu Qingyi suddenly turned transparent. Sitting in the bathtub, Lu Qingyi found herself staring blankly at Gu Junqing, who was sitting on the bed in the bedroom. Chapter 1190. Gu Junqing couldn't understand why women were always like this. It wasn't as if he hadn't seen it before, and after they had both made up their minds, she was still angry that he had snuck a peek at her body. We've been staying here for a few days, so I assumed you had already discovered that the glass is electrically switchable, Gu Junqing said hurriedly. Besides, you were muttering and cursing at me so loudly that I was just trying to offer a friendly reminder. Lu Qingyi sat on the bed with a cold, dreamlike, and flawlessly beautiful face. Her perfect, slender legs were crossed, and as she sat there with only a towel wrapped around her, her voluptuous curves were incredibly seductive. Is that any reason for you to look without my permission? Lu Qingyi finally stopped holding back and shouted at Gu Junqing. So what if I was cursing you? Didn't you deserve it? I practically offered myself to you, and you refused. Don't you think you deserve to be cursed? You've finished your shower, and you're still not over it? Gu Junqing pulled a wry face, looked at her damp hair, and stepped forward to pick up the hairdryer to dry it for her. Don't think that just because you're sucking up to me, I'll forgive you, Lu Qingyi huffed. Yes, of course, our diva has a distinguished status and isn't so easily forgiving, Gu Junqing chuckled lightly. As he stroked the hair in his hands, smoothing it from damp to silky, the atmosphere between them grew increasingly ambiguous. Gu Junqing set down the hairdryer, knowing it was time for him to take the lead. He snuggled up against Lu Qingyi, intimately sensing the warmth of each other's bodies. Did you bring that? Lu Qingyi suddenly asked in a low, shy voice. That? What do you mean? Gu Junqing was just about to get handsy, but he was stunned by the sudden question. Don't play dumb, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Lu Qingyi instinctively turned to glare at him, her eyes filled with shyness and irritation, feeling that he was teasing her again. Seeing that he still hadn't reacted, Lu Qingyi grew even angrier, assuming he was doing it on purpose. Her face turned red, and in a fit of embarrassment and anger, she slapped him on the head. I still have a concert to perform. I don't want to get pregnant right now. Oh, is that what you meant? Gu Junqing couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time. Ever since his strength reached the foundation establishment stage, he hadn't used protection for a long time. It served no purpose for him anyway. After all, if he didn't want someone to get pregnant, he could simply refine his essence into qi. Furthermore, most of the heroines didn't seem to care, with many even asking him not to use it. They all wanted to have his child to tie his heart to them, or perhaps just to secure an heir for the Gu family business. However, he didn't have such intentions yet, given that he hadn't even been an adult for many years. Don't worry about it. Nothing will happen. Besides, it feels much better without it. Gu Junqing wrapped his arms around Lu Qingyi's slender waist, whispering warmly into her ear. Nothing will happen? Are you impotent or wait, are you worried about having too many kids, so you got a vasectomy? Lu Qingyi asked, surprised. Gu Junqing's face instantly darkened, and he stared fixedly at Lu Qingyi. Piffed. Seeing his expression, Lu Qingyi couldn't help but burst into laughter. All right, let's sleep. A charming, rosy flush suddenly appeared on Lu Qingyi's pretty face as she rolled over and tucked herself into the blankets. Gu Junqing quickly followed her into the covers. Seeing that she was still wrapped in her bath towel, he couldn't help but mutter, "Why are you still wrapped in that towel? Waiting for me to undress you?" Humph, I'm guarding against a wolf. Where's the wolf? The wolf is hiding right under the covers. Chapter 1191. The cruise ship was massive, making it no easy task for Dao Tianyan to track down the assassins. After using ruthless interrogation methods on several of them, he finally located the ringleaders behind the assassination attempt on Lin Xue. Several of them were even his old acquaintances. There are quite a few small fries on this ship, but also some big fish. It seems the woman's second sister is protecting has quite the background. Dao Tianyan strolled leisurely toward the bottom of the ship, thinking to himself. More than 30 assassins from the top 100 list were present, along with many others who were famous in the mercenary and assassin worlds despite not being on the list. Some were there to capture Lin Xue, while others intended to execute her to get revenge on someone else. Even as the Azura King, a man who once shook the entire underworld to its core, he couldn't help but marvel at the luxurious lineup of killers sent for Lin Xue. The bounty was enough to make even him feel tempted. However, once he heard that most of the bidders were from that mysterious war zone, it all made sense. Anyone capable of entering that war zone possessed undeniable status and strength. Even a death row inmate could have their past crimes wiped clean and rise to become a person of influence if they performed meritorious deeds there. It was no wonder they had the connections and wealth to offer such a high price. After organizing the intelligence he had gathered, Dao Tianyan quickened his pace toward the bottom of the cruise ship. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the ship's hold, some of the most powerful assassins waited for news rather than charging in blindly like Night Stab and the Bloody Countess. Although Lin Xue was just an ordinary person, the individual guarding her was terrifying. After watching their colleagues get killed from the shadows, while the target remained unharmed, someone finally identified the bodyguard, Kite. Kite, the number 2 assassin on the world ranking list. This ranking list wasn't about fame, it was calculated based on combat records, assassination techniques, and the status of the victims. Many assassins despised being on this list, as it meant their records and true identities were impossible to conceal. However, the mysterious organization behind the list always found a way to verify and attribute the kills. Most assassins were frustrated by this, but had no choice but to accept it. This meant that everyone on the list was a star in the assassin world. Their records were generally authentic and untainted by exaggeration. Yet, Even among those on the list, there were vast differences in skill. The gap between the top 10 and those further down was like a chasm. This was even more true for the top 3. The mere name of the number 2 assassin was enough to terrify countless people out of making a move. They wanted the money, but they didn't want to lose their lives for it. Shadow, what do we do? We've heard nothing from Night Stab or the Bloody Countess. They've probably already been fed to the sharks. And they say there's a Grandmaster hunting us down, one assassin asked coldly, addressing another who wore headphones. They had all intended to act alone, knowing there was only one target, but many predators. However, the powerful protector by the target's side had forced them to band together. The priority now isn't the target. It's surviving the hunt, replied Shadow. He was a middle-aged man wearing headphones with a plain face, yet his eyes were deep, sharp, and calm. His gaze seemed to peer through the soul, capable of reading secrets and discerning the depths of a person's heart. Countless listening devices had been installed across the cruise ship, capable of monitoring the voices of thousands of passengers. Shadow could isolate specific voices from the cacophony with extreme precision, using the location of the devices to track his targets. He was the one who had originally located Lin Xue and Gu Junqing. This ability had earned him a massive reputation in the underworld, even though he rarely got his hands dirty and therefore wasn't on the list. He was a highly sought-after commodity in the assassin world, as anyone who teamed up with him never had to worry about tracking their targets. What's going on? An assassin asked. An extremely terrifying opponent is heading our way. No assassin has managed to survive a single round against him. He's even more fearsome than that Grandmaster. Let's run for it. Maybe a few of us will make it out alive. Chapter 1192. Shadow, if you're a coward, don't drag the rest of us down with you. There are dozens of assassins from the top 100 here, including him. I hear he's interested in Lin Xue too. With him around, neither Kite nor this new enemy should be a threat. A bald, muscle-bound assassin grumbled in response to Shadow's warning. Running away at the first sign of trouble wasn't his style. Butcher, I know you're decent, but you're no match for the expert coming for us, and you're certainly no match for Kite. Don't drag me down just because you have a death wish. Besides, that person is elusive as a ghost. Do you even know where he is? This mission is out of our league now. The middle-aged man known as Shadow snorted coldly. After warning the other assassins, he ripped off his headset and fled the room without a moment's hesitation. The remaining assassins were dumbfounded as Shadow bolted without another word. But none of them were idiots. Shadow had a massive reputation in the underworld. While those who teamed up with him often met with success or failure, and failure usually meant death, he had remained unscathed for years. This meant his instinct for detecting danger and fleeing was top tier. With him gone, the remaining killers didn't dare question his judgment and scattered instantly like startled birds. Even the butcher, who had argued just moments ago, began to waver as he watched his peers flee. Finally, he resolved to abandon the mission. He knew he stood no chance against Kite alone, let alone capturing Lin Xue while she was under her protection. Fortunately, he had spotted an external access route in the cabin and had stashed a small boat nearby for an emergency escape. Just as the butcher prepared to move, he froze in his tracks. Hazy moonlight filtered through the narrow porthole, casting a faint glow on his uncertain face. In that sliver of light, he discovered a bizarre figure standing just a short distance away. If the light hadn't cut through the darkness, he would have never noticed the person standing there. The fact that someone had gotten so close without him detecting a whisper of movement sent a chill down his spine. If his opponent had attacked from that distance, he likely wouldn't have survived even a few blows. He then realized that behind this figure lay several corpses, the very assassins who had been discussing how to kill Lin Xue just moments ago. You run fast, but it's useless. Dao Tianyan stepped slowly from the shadows, casually wiping blood from his hands with a piece of paper, as he shrugged at the visibly terrified butcher. In the past, he wouldn't have bothered with such a massacre, but because these people had angered his second sister and caused her to reprimand him, they had forfeited their right to live. Of course, Gu Junqing deserved death more than anyone, but since he didn't have a good way to deal with him yet, he would just have to vent his frustration on these assassins. Who are you? I've never met you before, so why resort to such violence? If there's anything you need done, I can help you. The butcher looked at the ordinary-looking man before him and tried to calm his breathing before speaking. The people who had fled earlier weren't much weaker than him, yet they had been killed silently and instantly. There hadn't even been a sound. They had been slaughtered in an instant. It was clear he wouldn't last more than a few moves against this man. Chapter 1193. Dao Tianyan chuckled and pulled a mask from his coat, sliding it over his face. The mask depicted a creature that was neither god, ghost, nor human, a monstrous thing that existed in the terrifying space between them. It was jagged and horrific. The mask was highly distinctive and intimidating. The butcher recognized it instantly. You're the Azura King. The cold glint in the butcher's eyes vanished, replaced by an instant pallor. It was as if all the blood had frozen inside him, leaving his body rigid and locked in place by an invisible force. I've met you before, Dao Tianyan said coldly. Why yes. The butcher's bloated face contorted. Despite his naturally ugly features, he wore an expression of profound bitterness. Anyone watching this would have been stunned. The butcher stood over 2 meters tall, his powerful muscles bulging with veins that writhed like snakes beneath his skin. With a simple squeeze of his arms, he could have crushed a man's skull. By comparison, the masked Dao Tianyan seemed small and frail. Yet, his mere presence was enough to terrify the giant. Didn't I warn you top 10 assassins? No matter what you do, you are not to target Kite. Dao Tianyan's gaze was sharp as an arrow. Kite was his second sister, Gu Junqing. After learning she had been acting in the shadows for the Xia Kingdom, taking out foreign dignitaries, he had issued a standing order to target her and face a global manhunt from the underworld. I didn't know Kite was protecting Lin Xue at first, the butcher replied, cold sweat drenching his skin. You knew the moment she attacked, yet you stayed. You were hoping that if you finished this one job, you could retire and hide somewhere I'd never find you. The coldness in Dao Tianyan's voice was suffocating. Yes, the butcher gritted out the word. He knew his next words would determine whether he lived or died. He felt no urge to resist the man before him. He knew exactly how terrifying the Azura King was. Years ago, this man had single-handedly broken the entire underworld to his will. Even when the Azura Society's headquarters were destroyed by some unknown titan, causing a massive stir, everyone watched with bated breath. Dark Titans, assassin organizations, and the Dark Divine Court all waited to see who had dared to poke the tiger. Many had conflicts with the Azura Society, but none dared to kick them while they were down. As long as the Azura King lived, they were afraid. You dare admit it? Dao Tianyan raised an eyebrow, his killing intent dimming slightly. I wouldn't move against Kite. I'm no match for her, anyway. I only wanted the bounty on Lin Xue, and I would even stop other ignorant assassins from attacking her. The butcher was bold and calculating, the only reason he had survived this long. Seeing the shift in the Azura King's aura, he knew he had likely bought his life. Since you admitted it, I won't kill you, but you will serve under me from now on. Dao Tianyan paused, deep in thought. His Azura Society was currently a skeleton crew, with no masters left besides himself. The fallout from the destruction of their headquarters had been disastrous. This was why he had been so constrained while dealing with Gu Junqing. Lately, mysterious forces had been targeting him, sabotaging his businesses and missions. He knew the threads led back to Gu Junqing, but he couldn't burden his sisters with it. With no other choice, he had to start recruiting whoever he could. Chapter 1194. Dao Tianyan found himself increasingly uncomfortable with the presence of Gu Junqing. He could no longer tolerate him remaining near his sisters, especially after tonight's events. In the past, his sisters would never have reprimanded him, no matter what mistakes he made. But today, he had been scolded by his second sister simply because he clashed with Gu Junqing. He still felt a lingering chill when he remembered the coldness in her eyes. He didn't care about criticism or verbal abuse from anyone else. He even treated it as a joke. But the importance of his 7 sisters was self-evident. Beyond the childhood memories of them caring for him and playing with him, there was a practical necessity. If he didn't practice dual cultivation with these 7 sisters to extract their essence, his 9-day Yang divine art would never reach perfection. Without that, he would not only fail to master his Yin-Yang divine fetus technique, but he would ultimately die of a ruptured body due to an accumulation of excessive Yang energy. Therefore, from any perspective, he could not tolerate anyone coveting his sisters. Furthermore, the way his sisters treated Gu Junqing made him burn with jealousy. Getting rid of Gu Junqing and making him vanish from his sister's sight had become an urgent matter. Doing so, however, was not easy. He needed a way to make his sisters see Gu Junqing for the scoundrel he truly was. He was working on this, but he hadn't found any solid evidence yet. He wouldn't give up on this path. He would continue to investigate. He refused to believe that someone in Gu Junqing's position could be a good person who had never done anything evil. He didn't even look like one. The less evidence he found, the more he felt that Gu Junqing must be a deeply treacherous villain. Another approach was to find Gu Junqing's weakness and defeat him completely. The simplest method would be to use overwhelming force. But he had tested Gu Junqing's strength before and found it unfathomable. He had been unable to gauge just how strong Gu Junqing really was. Yet, he refused to believe that Gu Junqing was stronger than him. He suspected Gu Junqing practiced some technique that made him impossible to read. Regardless, it proved that Gu Junqing was not to be underestimated. At the same time, Gu Junqing had Grandmaster-level experts protecting him. Aside from himself, there were few in the Azura Society who could assassinate Gu Junqing while he was under such close protection. He couldn't let his own people from the Azura Society take action, either. If someone like Gu Junqing died, others would strictly investigate. The Xia Kingdom was not just for show, and neither were Gu Junqing's backers. If Gu Junqing died, it would be easy to find out who was responsible. He wasn't afraid of the Xia Kingdom. If necessary, he could just flee to another country. But what he feared most was the attitude of his sisters. He needed them to agree to dual cultivation. If he caused them to resent him because of the situation with Gu Junqing, he would be losing the big picture for a trivial gain. However, if he used someone infamous like the butcher, his secret recruitment would go unnoticed by others. He could take this opportunity to have the butcher assassinate Gu Junqing. If it worked, great. If it failed, it had nothing to do with him. This was why, after careful consideration, Dao Tianyan decided not to eliminate the butcher. But he would still need the other man's consent. With this thought in mind, Dao Tianyan's gaze toward the butcher grew even more intense. Chapter 1195. The butcher hesitated for a long time, but eventually decided to accept Dao Tianyan's invitation. The current situation simply forced his hand. Azura King, you spared me and invited me to join the Azura Society because you have a task for me, don't you? The butcher asked slowly, his eyes gleaming with sharp insight. Exactly. I want you to investigate someone in secret. Dao Tianyan gave the butcher an approving look, not bothering to hide his intentions. Who am I investigating? I need you to go to Luodu and gather all information on the Gu family and their heir, Gu Junqing. Dao Tianyan's tone carried a hint of ruthlessness and absolute certainty. The Gu family? The butcher pondered this for a moment and immediately identified the family in question. He was not from the Xia kingdom, so he generally didn't concern himself with their major noble families. His strength allowed him to walk freely wherever he chose, but he had indeed heard of the Gu clan. Recently, it was rumored they had acquired numerous foreign assets, leaving countries like Eagle Nation itching to find a way to seize their properties legally. No country had taken action yet, but it spoke volumes about the scale of the Gu family's influence. They were no longer confined to the borders of the Xia kingdom. He suspected there were powerful experts hidden among them that he knew nothing about. Yet, Dao Tianyan wanted him to infiltrate the lion's den and investigate their heir? How was this any different from sneaking into a tiger's lair to count how much meat it had eaten, and how many bones it had spat out? That's right, Dao Tianyan said, his eyes unfathomable. This. The butcher looked troubled. I know the difficulty of this mission. If it's too much, I don't need intelligence on the entire Gu clan. You only need to investigate Gu Junqing himself and uncover the details of his private life. If he could prove to his sisters just how dissolute Gu Junqing's private life truly was, he didn't believe they would let him hang around them any longer. Especially the third sister. She despised men who toyed with women above all else. With her opposition, even if the seventh sister loved Gu Junqing and resisted, it would be to no avail. His private life. The butcher's eyes flickered, and he felt a wave of relief. If the task was just to look into a person's life, it would be much simpler. No matter how careful someone was, they would always leave traces behind. With his skills, he could investigate the less guarded aspects of a person's life in the shadows. Haven't you sent anyone else to do this, King? The butcher asked doubtfully. He is very wary of me. Most of the experts in my Azura society are in the public eye and easily monitored by him. You are different, you just joined, so he won't pay much attention to you. If you reach Luodu, just remember to avoid even the security cameras on the streets, Dao Tianyan explained. Understood. Hearing this, the butcher's heart tightened. He finally understood the gravity of the mission. If the Gu family could even mobilize the surveillance networks of the Xia kingdom, that told him everything he needed to know. It seemed the Gu family truly held total dominion over Luodu. No wonder the Azura king, who ranked among the strongest in the dark world, was so cautious. Go then. Once the cruise ship reaches the shore, travel secretly and try not to reveal yourself. Also, don't even think about running. Dao Tianyan continued to bark out warnings, but suddenly, he seemed to sense something. His expression turned grave, and after issuing one final, hurried order, he vanished from the butcher's sight. The butcher hadn't even caught a glimpse of how he had disappeared. He stood there, hesitating in place, before shaking his head in disappointment. The thoughts he had harbored began to fade. The gap between him and Dao Tianyan was too vast. Even if he tried to escape, he probably wouldn't make it out of his grasp. He knew he had been dragged into some sort of vortex. He lacked the power to break free, and perhaps the only chance he had to survive was to complete the task Dao Tianyan had given him. Chapter 1196. The nighttime ocean resembled a deep, mysterious canvas, with the sky dyed a profound dark blue, and dotted with twinkling stars. Moonlight poured over the water, blending silver-white light into the waves like a massive sheet of silk swaying gently in the breeze. The cruise ship glided quietly across the dark expanse, its brilliant lights illuminating the pitch-black waters surrounding it. However, if anyone had been watching from the deck, they would have seen the nearby sea churning violently with thunderous crashes. Emperor of Killers, I didn't expect you to wade into these muddy waters. Surely you don't care about Lin Xue's meager bounty, Dao Tianyan said coldly. He stood directly on the ocean surface, narrowing his eyes at the elderly man walking across the water toward him. The old man looked entirely ordinary, his aura faint and weak. Even so, Dao Tianyan did not dare to underestimate him in the slightest. The Emperor of Killers held the absolute top rank on the assassin leaderboard. Dao Tianyan's second sister ranked second, which seemed like a minor gap, but the actual chasm between them was immense. This old man was a transcendent figure who had achieved martial sainthood. Despite his aged appearance, his profound inner strength combined with his miraculous assassination techniques made him incredibly difficult to defeat. Rumor had it that he once executed a legendary strike, killing a grandmaster of the exact same realm in a single blow. Dao Tianyan wondered why someone of this caliber would target Lin Xue. An old friend of mine died at the hands of the god of war, and I heard this girl is vital to him. I want revenge, so step aside, Azura King. This has nothing to do with you, the Emperor of Killers said evenly. His aura was entirely restrained, making his presence practically imperceptible. If he hadn't deliberately revealed his approach, even Dao Tianyan might have failed to notice him. Haha, an old fossil like you actually has friends? Dao Tianyan laughed loudly, a hint of disdain flickering at the corner of his mouth. Although the Emperor of Killers had slain an equal in the past, that had occurred under perfect conditions with the element of surprise. Dao Tianyan would be wary if an assassin of that caliber targeted him from the shadows, but face to face, he felt no fear at all. It seems you are determined to stop me, the Emperor of Killers noted, completely unprovoked by the mockery. Dao Tianyan remained silent for a moment as his mind raced. Although he had some interest in Lin Xue's beauty, the recent incident with the cross-dressing Yapeng had made him wary of outside women. No matter how beautiful they were, they could never compare to his beloved sisters. Therefore, he did not truly care whether Lin Xue lived or died. If she fell to the Emperor of Killers, it would merely be a slight pity for a pretty face to go to waste. Furthermore, if he let the assassin pass, Gu Junqing would inevitably step in to protect her, creating a perfect opportunity for the Emperor of Killers to eliminate Gu Junqing instead. However, his second and third sisters were also on board. He worried they might get caught in the crossfire if a conflict erupted, leaving him deeply conflicted. The moment Dao Tianyan's eyes flickered with hesitation, a sudden flash of light pierced the assassin's dead, emotionless stare. The Emperor of Killers took a violent step forward, causing the trembling ocean surface to shudder beneath his weight. He launched himself forward like an arrow, carving a massive white wake through the waves and kicking up a towering wall of water. Chapter 1197. The 100-meter distance was bridged in a single heartbeat under the Emperor of Killers' feet. He noticed the split-second distraction and, without hesitation, launched his attack. At their level of strength, a moment's hesitation was the difference between life and death. The Emperor curled his fingers into a blade, a brilliant, transparent aura of energy surging as he slashed directly at Dao Tianyan's throat. Dao Tianyan did not panic. He waved his hands repeatedly, churning the seawater into towering waves and raising walls of transparent liquid. These walls, condensed from water and infused with his boundless true energy, were as resilient as reinforced steel. Yet, beneath the Emperor's condensed blade, they shattered like fragile paper. "It seems you old fossil have made some progress," Dao Tianyan laughed. He clenched his hand into a fist and threw a punch from afar, sending a translucent, invisible wave of energy cutting through the void. It traced a long mark across the rain-swept air, streaking toward the Emperor's chest like a bullet entering water. The Emperor's expression shifted slightly, and he recoiled violently, not daring to take the strike head-on. Assassins were already at a disadvantage in direct combat, and using his own weaknesses to counter an enemy's strength was a recipe for death. Dao Tianyan ignored the retreat, spreading his arms like wings in the air as two wings of mist and cloud manifested behind him. Like a giant bird of prey, he swooped down toward the Emperor's position. Although the Emperor had seized the initiative, it mattered little to Dao Tianyan. His wide-sweeping, powerful offensive made it difficult for the assassin to mount a defense. In the end, however, the Emperor's movement technique proved superior, allowing him to escape before Dao Tianyan could lock him into close-quarters combat. "You have lost your opening, so I suggest you retreat," Dao Tianyan declared, his entire body glowing with golden light. "Otherwise, my second sister might just have to take the Emperor of Killers' seat for herself." The Emperor remained silent, his eyes fixed on Dao Tianyan as if still hunting for an opening. He did not want to abandon this chance. Lin Xue was right there on the cruise ship. He didn't even need to defeat a formidable enemy like Dao Tianyan. He simply needed to evade him. Taking Lin Xue's head would be as easy as reaching into his pocket, a task requiring only an instant. Meanwhile, as the two clashed outside, a different kind of battle raged in the cruise ship's luxury suite. Gu Junqing and Lu Qingyi were pressed together, nose to nose. The towel wrapping Lu Qingyi had long since been cast aside. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly as she gazed into Gu Junqing's face, closing her eyes in shy surrender while her breath, heavy with damp, sweet fragrance, washed over his cheeks. Her cherry-pink lips parted slightly, and unable to resist the temptation of the beauty before him, Gu Junqing bowed his head to capture his third sister's moist, full lips. Taking advantage of a moment of distraction, he pulled her small feet from where they rested on his shoulders and pressed down, folding her soft body until her knees touched her shoulders, her delicate soleil swaying faintly toward the ceiling. MMPH. Lu Qingyi's brow furrowed in bashful distress at his movements, her voice trapped in a muffled whimper. The hands that had been clutching the headboard slowly loosened, drifting instinctively to wrap around Gu Junqing's sturdy back. As he pressed downward, she couldn't help but let out a soft groan. On Lu Qingyi's face flushed a deep crimson, and she arched her neck, trembling and gasping as her fingernails raked 10 white marks into Gu Junqing's back. Her voice sounded like a weeping plea, full of both resentment and yearning. Chapter 1198. Lu Qingyi wore the sheer, black silk stockings that Gu Junqing had specially prepared for her. The stockings clung to her shapely, slender legs, accentuating the smooth, satin-like curves from her thighs down to her calves, while her pale skin peeked through the fabric in an intensely seductive display. Beneath the black silk, her delicate, pink-soled feet were faintly visible. Once destined only to walk the earth, they now swayed gently toward the ceiling, while her soft whimpers melded with the rhythmic creaking of the bed to create a stirring melody. No one could have imagined that the queen of the Xia Kingdom's music industry, the goddess Lu whom all the nation admired, was now being so lewdly desecrated by a man in bed. If anyone discovered this, it would cause an absolute sensation. "You be gentle, no, not there." Third sister hissed. "Don't clench so tightly. Stop just whimpering and loosen up a bit." A blade's aura tore through the air with a sharp crack. Dao Tianyan felt a sudden panic and failed to dodge in time. He could only force a shift to the left, but the blade still slashed his arm, causing blood to flow instantly. This sudden turn of events forced both combatants to halt, with even the assassin emperor surprised that he had actually landed a hit on Dao Tianyan. He had been on the back foot throughout the fight, and he had even begun to consider retreating, thinking it wasn't worth leaving his old bones behind. But now that Dao Tianyan's state was clearly off, the assassin's competitive spirit reignited. Dao Tianyan retreated to the surface of the sea nearby, where the boundless night and endless ocean filled his vision. The cruise ship remained close by, but its lights seemed to drift further away. In a daze, he he seemed to see a beautiful silhouette emerge from the night, reminding him of the days he spent with his sisters at the orphanage. It must have been autumn, with golden fallen leaves scattered over the blue bricks, and several young girls laughing as they swung on an old tree. Eighth brother, come here and push the swing for us. Tianyan, don't listen to your seventh sister, she only knows how to bully you. So what if I bully him? He's the only one in the whole orphanage younger than me, so if I don't bully him, no one will. Pift, you were both born in the same year. I don't know why you have to act like you're older just to bully people every single day. It's okay, third sister. I'm willing to let seventh sister bully me. Don't be afraid. If seventh sister bullies you, just tell me, and I'll beat her up for you. One of the girls tilted her head in thought, then flashed a bright, radiant smile. It was pure and untainted, like warm sunshine in winter. The little, snotty-nosed Dao Tianyan had stood there foolishly, staring at the beautiful girl in a daze. Her smile had shone into his heart like a ray of sunlight. Even as he walked the bloody path to become the Azura King, that smile remained the one spark of light in his dark soul. By guarding this light, he had managed not to lose himself amidst the slaughter. To Dao Tianyan, his sisters were no longer just childhood playmates, they had become his religion. The sea breeze brushed against Dao Tianyan's face, pulling him back to reality. He didn't know why, but he felt an abnormal sense of panic, as if something truly terrifying had just happened. Even the light he had guarded so closely in his heart had grown dim and uncertain. Across from him, the assassin emperor clearly noticed that something was wrong with Dao Tianyan, but he did not act rashly, fearing this was a trap to lure him in. Chapter 1199. Dao Tianyan's black combat attire was shredded with countless slashes, and crimson blood slowly seeped from the wounds beneath. What is happening to me? Why do I feel so anxious? Could I have been poisoned? Dao Tianyan felt his limbs go weak, and even his usually unshakable mental state began to waver, leaving him dazed. He had actually been wounded in his duel with the Emperor of Killers. Dao Tianyan stared blankly at his own scarred hands. Ever since he had mastered the 9 heavens Ying divine arts, he could not remember the last time he had been injured. There were hardly anyone left in this world who could be considered his match. His heart had grown hesitant, perhaps even weak. He felt utter panic rising within him. It was as if some mysterious intuition was constantly warning him of something. That sensation felt exactly as if he had lost something precious and irreplaceable. This intuition had occurred many times before. Yet, every single time, he had no idea what it stemmed from. As each second ticked by, the oppressive feeling in his chest grew increasingly intense. It felt as though he wanted to vent it out, yet it remained stubbornly lodged in his throat. An urgent, irrepressible desire to return to the cruise ship stirred within him. This desperation lent a ferocious glint to his eyes as he glared viciously at the Emperor of Killers before him. The Emperor of Killers felt as if he were being hunted by a savage beast, causing his heart to shudder. Yet, he did not retreat. Even if he wasn't currently Dao Tianyan's match, it would not be easy for Dao Tianyan to take him down. The two collided once again, but this time, Dao Tianyan practically overwhelmed the Emperor, who could not defend against a single move or technique. He could only rely on his movement arts to dodge across the surface of the sea. After narrowly dodging another strike from Dao Tianyan, the Emperor of Killers kicked off the water violently, unfurling his white cloud wings. Fueled by his immense true energy, the seawater beneath his feet collapsed instantly into a concave shape. He used this reactionary force to propel himself backward like a shooting star. The Emperor noticed that something was off with Dao Tianyan's state. His aura was dispersing wildly, and while the momentum was grand, the power was no longer as concentrated and refined as it had been at the start. Although he appeared to be at a disadvantage, he now found himself maneuvering with ease amidst Dao Tianyan's assault. Emperor of Killers, if you do not leave now, I will strike you down. Dao Tianyan roared in fury as he watched the assassin refuse to engage him head-on. The voice was bone-chilling, yet the Emperor could detect the underlying lack of conviction. Haha, then let me pass. I will not touch anyone except Lin Xue, otherwise, neither of us will leave this place alive. The Emperor laughed, unconcerned by the threat in Dao Tianyan's words. They had traded so many blows that, although Dao Tianyan had initially held the upper hand and even possessed the power to crush him, his current state had changed. For unknown reasons, he was no longer as precise or in control as he had been at the beginning. A Dao Tianyan in this state could not kill him. The surrounding sea water churned violently as their auras collided, sending massive waves crashing in all directions. Both were beings who had surpassed the Grandmaster level and stepped into the divine realm. Even in terms of cultivation, they were figures comparable to those in the Foundation establishment stage. A clash of this magnitude was enough to fundamentally affect the surrounding environment. Even a tank or armored vehicle would be instantly pulverized into dust before them. Dao Tianyan's expression flickered with uncertainty. He knew he shouldn't trust the words of an assassin. Yet, with his mind in such turmoil, he found it difficult to easily take down the man before him. Above all else, he needed to confirm the safety of his sisters. Without that, his heart would never find peace. He had already realized that the only things capable of causing such a disturbance in his spirit were his beloved sisters. Something must have gone wrong on their end. Driven by this, Dao Tianyan felt an urgent, desperate need to return to the cruise ship. Chapter 1200. Truth be told, Dao Tianyan felt that letting the assassin emperor pass wasn't entirely out of the question. If not for the fear that he might threaten the safety of his sisters, he really didn't want to exert the thankless effort of blocking him. Why should Gu Junqing sit back and enjoy the benefits on the cruise ship while he had to be the one to stop the assassin emperor? Dao Tianyan grew increasingly annoyed, and his motivation to block the assassin from boarding the ship began to wane. The most critical issue was that he had initially believed stopping the assassin would be an easy task. Yet, his current state was clearly off. That former feeling of oneness with nature, where every gesture seemed to align with the heavens, had weakened significantly. Consequently, even though he could still suppress the assassin emperor, he found himself taking injuries in the process. That was hardly worth the trouble. Even though he found Lin Xue's beauty stunning, the two were practically strangers. She was clearly more interested in Gu Junqing, offering him nothing more than a faint nod of acknowledgement. Therefore, he had absolutely no reason to risk his life fighting the assassin emperor over her. How can you guarantee you won't target anyone other than Lin Xue? Dao Tianyan asked coldly. He was well aware of the assassin emperor's hostility toward his second sister, Gu Junqing. After all, she was the second-ranked assassin on the leaderboard, right below him. She certainly posed a threat to his position. Furthermore, the assassin emperor had clashed with Gu Junqing on several occasions, and Dao Tianyan had intervened in secret every time. He had even warned the entire assassin underworld that no one was to target Gu Junqing, whose code name was Kite. This was the only reason his second sister had been able to navigate the assassin world so smoothly. Otherwise, even with her significant strength, it would not have been so easy for her to reach her current standing. I cannot offer a guarantee, but I can swear by my name as the assassin emperor, she is not my target right now. The assassin emperor replied with a serious expression. At his level, he didn't truly value grudges or reputation. Especially as a killer, would an assassin really care about such things? Promises and reputations were essentially bullshit. He knew this, and he knew Dao Tianyan knew it too. Regardless, if Dao Tianyan wouldn't let him pass, he would just waste time here with him. He refused to believe that his years of cultivated true energy were inferior to someone who was clearly much younger than him. I can let you pass, but I have one condition, I must accompany you. Dao Tianyan's expression shifted uncertainly, but in the end, he agreed. His final demand was to stay by the assassin emperor's side to monitor him at all times. Otherwise, since the assassin's greatest strengths were assassination and concealment, he might not be able to detect him once he went into hiding. I agree, but you must swear by your name as the Azure King that you will not prevent me from killing Lin Xue. The assassin emperor's cold eyes narrowed, staring at Dao Tianyan like a venomous snake. He had to admit that compared to his own reputation, Dao Tianyan's reputation as the Azure King was far better. Of course, Dao Tianyan answered readily. After a simple oath, they were able to approach each other with unexpected composure. They drew closer as they hovered above the water, but stopped simultaneously when they reached a distance where each was certain they could kill the other in a single strike. With mutual vigilance in their hearts, both felt a sense of relief when they realized the other truly had no intention of attacking. Then let's go. Dao Tianyan felt a fleeting sense of guilt for selling out Lin Xue, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. If Lin Xue had treated him better, he might have helped her stop the assassin emperor. However, her obvious attempts to curry favor with Gu Junqing left a sour taste in Dao Tianyan's mouth. He couldn't be bothered to save her. If she liked Gu Junqing so much, then Gu Junqing should be the one to save her. A calculating glint flashed in Dao Tianyan's eyes. If possible, he even wanted to team up with the assassin emperor to execute Gu Junqing right there on the cruise ship. Once done, he could simply blow up the entire cruise ship, leaving no trace of evidence, and pin all the blame on the assassin emperor. His sisters wouldn't blame him, and he wouldn't be hunted or targeted. It was a perfect plan. He just needed to establish a basic level of trust with the assassin emperor first. Looking at the old man beside him, who seemed relaxed but was actually on high alert, Dao Tianyan felt a headache coming on. To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.